Welcome, everybody, to Adapt or Perish, episode 66, Anne of Green Gables, part 2. If you haven't heard part 1, it was the very first episode of this show, and if you're an Anne on Adapt or Perish completionist, you should check it out. But if you want to go ahead and jump straight into part 2, you should be just fine. Before we get into it, let's talk about our next episode. So in this episode, you'll hear more of our thoughts about our earlier episodes, but the quick version is that we limited our scope in a way that we try not to do now. And much in the way that we wanted to revisit Anne of Green Gables and talk about adaptations we didn't previously cover, we wanted to revisit another of our early episodes. In 2 weeks, we'll be taking another look at Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. We'll still be discussing the 1995 BBC miniseries and the 2005 movie with Keira Knightley, but we'll also be looking back at the 1940 movie with Laurence Olivier and Greer Garson and the 1980 BBC miniseries with Elizabeth Garvey and David Rintoul. We had a lot of fun with this episode, and we expect to have a lot of fun with that one too. That's in 2 weeks on Tuesday, May 19th. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections about today's episode that you'd like to hear on the show, remember to email adaptorperishcast@gmail.com or tweet at us using the AdaptCast hashtag. If you enjoy the show, we'd love it if you would share that with the world by leaving a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. Show notes from this and all other episodes can be found at adaptorperishcast.com. And with that, on with the show, Adapt or Perish, episode 66, Anne of Green Gables, part 2. Hello and welcome to Adapt or Perish, a podcast about adaptation. I'm Jeremy Latour.
And I'm Arielle Lipshaw. And checks notes, this is Anne of Green Gables?
Anne of the Green Gables?
We already did Anne of Green Gables. What are we doing?
By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
Does not make sense. Well, I guess we can be done. We already did this one.
'Tis the season for do-overs. This is the season of the virus, the season of the pandemic, where we really look inside ourselves and reevaluate our lives. And we did the same thing, and we said, you know what? If everything ends horribly, we can't go out knowing that we didn't revisit Anne of Green Gables, episode 1 of this show.
Yes.
Maybe that was more important for me.
I think it was.
All right, I re-listened to our first episode this weekend for the first time ever.
Oh, man.
I don't go back and listen to our old episodes.
The past is in the past, says Jeremy.
Well, it's not so much that. It's more
the
like...
past is gone.
It's the past where we were still figuring stuff out is in the past.
Yeah, and also didn't have, like, good microphones and stuff. Do you remember we had, like, 2 different microphones? And
we
like,
sound different.
We didn't have stands, and I didn't have a chair. Remember, I didn't have a chair.
I didn't, like, make you stand while we were recording.
No, and, like, we put a bunch of pillows around that didn't really do anything to muffle the sound.
We sure don't do that anymore.
We just had bad microphones.
Yeah, we've learned a lot. Our craft has our craft has improved as time has gone on. So I'll say a thing that is like probably a little narcissistic. I'm not saying I never go back and listen to our own show. And it's not because I like the sound of my own voice. I tolerate the sound of my own voice. I think our show's pretty good. And there are some episodes that I enjoy, so I go back and listen to them. I don't listen to anything that's like before episode, I think Jaws was 19.
Yeah.
I don't listen to anything before that.
Yeah, I've tried to, and it was really painful.
We did our reruns when Calvin was born, and you wanted to do Little Women. And we put that out for the world again.
Yeah, I didn't listen to it, though. I didn't re-listen to it.
And
I don't know what I was thinking.
Like, I don't think it was bad, but like clearly it was good enough that we kept doing it, but we were still figuring things out.
Right.
So I owe 2 apologies.
Yeah.
And I want to take this moment to do that.
Corrections corner.
Yeah. Well, one of those apologies, I am not going to apologize for the quality of our show at the beginning. I'm not going to do that because we were learning and I think we're much better now. But I owe 2 apologies. One of those apologies I owe to you.
Yeah.
You already know what I'm you don't even know what I'm talking about. You just assume that I did something in episode 1 that I owe you an apology about.
Probably did.
In episode 1, we were talking about the Netflix series Anne with an E, starring Amy Beth McNulty as Anne. And in the episode, you made a very interesting point, which is that her Canadian accent is really good considering the fact that she is Irish. And I said, I mean, yeah, she's technically Irish, but she doesn't like have an Irish accent or anything. And you said, no, she does. And I said, no, she doesn't. And we moved on from there. And I was very confident in my thinking. I was totally wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even remember saying that, honestly.
Yeah. And honestly, I knew you were wrong at the time, and I didn't want to have a fight on that, our very first episode.
No, but I'm sorry.
We might never have had a second.
Can you just please accept my apology?
I accept your apology.
Thank you very much.
You are welcome.
Another thing here's the other person I owe an apology to. I owe an apology to Geraldine James.
Oh, no.
One of the stars of Anne with an E. Because we were so, I have notes now. I do research now. I didn't do any of that at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a moment in the show where we were saying, oh, yeah, the actress who plays Marilla is good. What's her name? And then for what feels like 15 minutes, I am rifling through the internet trying to find the name of an actress who's very well known and very good, who now has come to mean a lot to us.
Mm-hmm.
The idea, I was shocked that I didn't know who she was at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And Geraldine...
Well, she's been in Star Wars since then.
She had been at that time.
Oh, well, then
No excuse.
No excuse.
Geraldine, Miss James, I am very sorry. You are a treasure, and I'm sorry. You're wonderful.
Yeah.
You're Geraldine James. How does anyone not know that you're Geraldine James? You are.
I think she accepts
Please
your
accept my apology,
in
Miss
absentia,
James.
in absentia, Geraldine James could not be here with us this evening. So I accept your apology for her, and I am sure that she wishes you well.
Well, I really appreciate that.
Yes.
But why are we doing this?
I don't know. Why are we doing this?
Are we just doing this because we're not happy with the quality of the first episode?
No.
That is not why. That is not why. Would you like to tell everyone why we are doing this? What has changed in the last 3 years of doing this show?
We have become very comprehensive.
Yes.
And we used to have conversations where we were like, well, there's this other version. I mean, we don't have to watch that. Let's just watch these two. I mean, there's 6 versions.
It's too many versions.
I mean, I guess let's choose the ones we want to watch. Now we're like, no, we must watch every Dracula ever of all time that has ever been committed to film.
That is easily accessible on the internet, because if we have to get it physically, it just generally doesn't happen.
Especially now. We do have still a DVD of a Lifetime original movie that I believe I did promise to someone, so we'll send that along.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
I totally forgot about
Yeah.
it. Do we still have that?
We must.
I know you promised it to somebody.
I did promise it. Anyway, yes, so we neglected several important versions of Anne of Green Gables and several non-important versions of Anne of Green Gables. In fact, one that I said, I don't want to watch that because it looks bad.
Yeah.
And you were like, this just goes to show how much our show has changed. Because if today I said something like, I don't want to watch that because it looks bad, you would be like, what? I mean, yeah, that's our job. We have to watch bad things and talk about them on a podcast. That's what we do.
There are literally dozens of people who listen to this show. We owe it to them.
Everyone. We owe it to everyone.
There are dozens of us.
Literally
Dozens.
Dozens.
So we are being a little more... Now, I have a whole list of Anns that we're not talking about in this episode.
Not for lack of trying.
No, these are the lost or I originally called my list the Lost Anns, but really a lot of them aren't lost. They're just only available on DVD,
yeah.
Which does not make it super easy. But there are 5 versions that we're talking about today. We are talking about, and these are, I would say, the 5 most major versions in that they are the most easily accessible versions of Anne of Green Gables.
Mostly for free. Or
no, they're available in different ways
on streaming services that we already pay for.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
We have actually, you know what? Before I get into the first version, let me just say this. It would be nice if people went back and listened to the original one. And if people go back and listen to the first episode, yeah, we really talk about the book in detail. And we go into detail on 1985's Anne of Green Gables, the Megan Follows version. And we talked about Anne with an E.
The first season.
Right, yeah. Because that was all that was out at that point.
Yeah.
We've watched more of it, and we have a lot more to talk about this episode. One thing I don't think we need to talk about in great detail here, if you go back and listen to the first one, is just the intense plot of the book, Anne of Green Gables.
Yes.
But I think it would be very nice if you could give folks a couple of minute just recap. What is the basic plot of Anne of Green Gables?
An elderly brother and sister, Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert, who live on Prince Edward Island, decide to adopt a boy from an orphanage to help them on their farm. There is a mistake somewhere in the line of communication, and instead of a boy, they are sent a young, red-headed girl named Anne Shirley. Through a series of adventures, Anne endears herself to both the Cuthberts and the town of Avonlea in which they live, growing into a beautiful young woman. And the book, Anne of Green Gables, ends with her, age 16, going off to college at Queen's Academy. There are a total of 8 books in the series. We are only talking about the first one, but it follows Anne basically through her whole life, where she becomes very conservative and boring. But the first book is wonderful and great, and everyone should read it. And also, Matthew dies at the end. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say there were two characters you left out, like in detail. One of them is Matthew Cuthbert, who does die.
Yes.
And the other one is Gilbert Blythe.
Yes.
Her
love interest.
Yeah. What's the 30-second version of Gilbert Blythe that will probably only take you 10 seconds to do?
Young boy from Avonlea School, friend and neighbor. They're in a fight, and then at the end they make up and are friends.
At the end of the first book.
At the end of the first book, they're friends. They end the first book as friends.
How many babies does he put in her eventually?
Like 6.
That's a bunch of babies.
One set of twins.
Mm-hmm.
Just one.
Oh, gee. Well, that's good, because she does 3 sets of twins is too many.
Too many. Just one set of twins.
I can make that joke now. I couldn't do that in episode 1. I know this much better than I did at that point.
That's great.
Yeah, so I think it's safe to say that this book means a lot to you. I think it's worth going into that for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Why does this book mean so much to you?
Well, I mean, it just happens to be my favorite book of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And
did you ever once read your childhood copy of Anne of Green Gables on the beach on Prince Edward Island?
I did do that
in
yes.
Cavendish.
It was great. Prince Edward Island's great. There's a lot more Anne of Green Gables stuff than I was expecting. You could just do 100% the Anne of Green Gables tour, which we did.
Yeah.
No, it's a wonderful book. I am really into like children's books from that era anyway. But Anne, I mean, as has been said many, many times by many, many other people who are not me, just a legendary character of literature. She's got a great personality and she's just wonderful. She's just a wonderful creation.
Yeah. Much like Spinal Tap at the end of the movie, for some reason she's big in Japan.
She's big in Japan.
I actually found out some more information about that. Maybe later in the episode I'll go into
it. All right,
it.
we'll get into it later. We have a section coming up that I think that'll slot in nicely.
I find it fascinating.
Yeah.
Because when we were there were so many Japanese tourists.
There were so many Japanese tourists. And basically all we were told was like, yeah, it's big in Japan. So they come over here. We're like, okay,
like,
cool.
That's not enough. I need more context.
Yeah.
And years later, I received the context that I needed.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I just want to say really quickly, like, one of the other things that was weird going back to episode 1 is that at the time, this really didn't mean anything to me. And in the 3 years that have passed since then, I can say now that I am a huge fan of Anne Shirley Cuthbert.
Mm-hmm.
I love her so much in a way that I didn't at the time.
Yeah.
And I can't say that it's only from reading the book. A lot of it is from some of the versions that we watched. And it's one of those things where we got to the end, like we would go through certain versions for this episode, and I would think to myself, like, this is bullshit. She would never do this. And I would have to reflect on that for a second and go, wow, you feel very strongly about Anne Shirley Cuthbert.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say to myself, yeah, I think I do.
Mm-hmm.
I love her. She's wonderful.
Aww.
And I'm excited to get another shot at this because now I really like Anne and I really like Marilla and Matthew and even Gilbert. Like, I feel like I've become a defender of Gilbert.
You are Gilbert Stan.
I like him. I like the guy. He's doing his best. I think it's worth mentioning.
Anne deserves better.
That Anne of Green Gables means more to me now than she did 3 years ago. I just wanted to say that. But I think we should probably get started with our first version of Anne that we watched for this show.
Yes.
God, I just made myself think. Okay, here's one other apology I have. This actually is to the listeners for episode 1. Listening to it, I just genuinely hope that none of our listeners have ever thought to themselves, oh, shut up, Jeremy, because that would really hurt my feelings. But I assume if you thought that, I deserved it. Listening to episode 1, my reaction was, shut up, Jeremy, because I say the words, go back and listen to it. I don't let 5 seconds pass on the show without saying, uh-huh, yup, exactly, or absolutely. There is no...
Well, you were still doing your like NPR interviewer voice at the time.
I don't understand
that. You kind of dropped that.
I don't understand why I couldn't just shut the fuck up and let you talk.
I don't know.
Oh, we also didn't swear in that show. There's so many times in it where we're saying like gosh darn and heck because we thought the show was going to be like family friendly
be, like,
at the
educational.
time. And like it's fucking not at all.
We were like, I mean, maybe teachers will want to like play this in classrooms, so like we probably shouldn't
I
swear.
never said that.
We said that too. We said that.
I might have said that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry. Back to the show at hand. So let's just start with 1934's Anne of Green Gables.
Mm-hmm.
This was one I had never heard of. Did you know this one existed?
Yes.
Like academically?
Yes, academically, because I knew that the lead actress playing Anne Shirley. I mean, well, let's just get into it.
So you're talking about Dawn Evelyn Paris, the famous actress?
No.
Well, you would know her better as her stage name that she changed her name to Dawn O'Day.
Uh-huh.
You know Dawn O'Day, right?
I'm not familiar, no.
Oh, you would know her. She actually changed her name a second time.
Did she now?
To Anne Shirley.
Literally, the credits of this movie, it says Anne Shirley as Anne Shirley.
And that is what she was known as for the rest of her career.
Of her life.
She didn't change her name after the movie. She did the movie and thought, man, I know that this is going to be big.
I really identify with this character.
This is going to be the thing I am known for. I better change my name now, just in case.
And she
just
did.
in case.
And she did.
It could have gone so badly. I can imagine anyone in January who said, you know what? Summer's coming up. I really got to get stock in Airbnb just to make sure that I get out in front of this travel season. This could have gone very badly for her.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, as you say, this stars Anne Shirley as Anne Shirley.
So to answer your question, have you heard of this? Yes, I knew that there was a version that existed where the lead actress had changed her name to Anne Shirley. I had not seen it.
So how about I give you some production information for this? Because, I mean, yes, we've gone through the crazy story of Anne Shirley, born Dawn Evelyn Paris. It's crazy. It's fucking crazy. It was directed by George Nichols Jr. It was written by Sam Mintz. There's a few other people in the movie who are of note. I would say I think the actors that stood out to us the most were probably Helen Wesley's Marilla Cuthbert for different reasons that we'll get into. O.P. Heggie as Matthew Cuthbert. He is absolutely of note because he is the blind man in The Bride of Frankenstein, which is fucking amazing. He's super fun in this.
That's how long ago this movie was, by the way.
Right? 1930 of the 4. Tom Brown is Gilbert.
Uh-huh.
I don't know why I said he's noteworthy. He's in it. He's there.
You found out he was in an Abbott and Costello movie.
I love Abbott and Costello.
15 years later.
Yeah, he was in Buck Privates Come Home. Anyway, it's fun. I like Abbott and Costello. They're great. There's two other people. The actresses aren't as important as the characters because we do have Gertrude Messenger as Diana Barry, and then we also have Sarah Hayden as Rachel Barry. And we were surprised at that.
It took me a minute to get my bearings watching this because there was the iconic opening shot of Mrs. Lind, or so we thought, watching Matthew Cuthbert drive down the road away from Avonlea to go do something in her, gossipy, curious way. And then she calls to her daughter, Diana, go do a thing. Diana, 25 years old, in blonde sausage curls, runs on screen. And I was like, wait, is Mrs. Lind not in this? Oh, shit, no. They're making Mrs. Lind Diana's mom? So it's going to be Diana Lind? And I was like, no. They made Mrs. Rachel Lind into Rachel Barry. So Diana's mom, Mrs. Barry, no first name given, and Mrs. Rachel Lind are combined into the same character. It really threw us off for the first 5 minutes of the film as we tried to figure out who everybody was. My notes are like, wait, it's this? No, okay, it's this. Oh God, no, it's this. It was like a train of thought as I tried to figure it out.
Yeah, it was weird. I mean, I think it's a good way to kind of segue into the fact that once we kind of got our bearings, it was actually kind of surprising how the first half of this movie is a pretty faithful adaptation of Anne of Green Gables.
Yeah, the first, as you say, the first half cleaved to the book, and I was pleasantly surprised.
I think we both were.
Yeah, the first half, I would say even half to 3/4 was very faithful to the book. It had a lot of stuff that not all versions have. The dialogue was very close to the dialogue in the book, and then it went off the rails in a way that I appreciated, in as much as there had been stuff dropped. It was actually a cleverly written script because they were sort of dropping these little hints throughout as to the way it was going to go. And I was writing down why are they talking about Marilla? Are the Cuthberts in a feud with Gilbert Blythe's family? What is the purpose of this? And then that came to fruition at the end. So they introduced.
How does it come to fruition?
Okay. So in the book, Anne of Green Gables, there is a backstory to Marilla that she was once courted in her youth by Gilbert Blythe's father. And they quarreled and they did not make it up. And Gilbert Blythe's father never came back, and he went to America and he married Gilbert Blythe's mother. And so she never married. So in this version, they kind of switched everything around. So Marilla is very angry at the Blythe family because Matthew once dated Gilbert's mother and she threw him over for Gilbert's father. So they have this vendetta against the Blythes because they did Matthew wrong at one point and he never married. And then Marilla had to stay home and take care of him. So she never got the chance to go out into the world and presumably marry or whatever.
Which is really strange because this Marilla is just she's a hot ticket.
Yeah. Okay, I don't want to body shame anyone, especially like this long dead elderly woman.
And yet here we go.
Her bust was very distracting.
What, in like a Dolly Parton kind of way?
No, in more of a way of like, that's her boob, that's her waist. They're on a level, if not lower. It's
like in some cartoons where you see, like, if anyone ever points out to you, like, do you ever notice that character's nose actually extends past their mouth to their chin?
Yeah.
Like, you never notice it because it's a cartoon.
Yeah.
But then, we get something like this in real life.
Do you ever notice, like, someone's bust line is usually about shoulder level? Her boobs were about at a belly button or waist level, and she was not wearing any type of foundation garment.
Her boobs looked like they really wanted to go to ground. That's what they wanted. They were like, oh, the ground, I want to lie down. I want a good lie down.
And
that's what I want.
At one point, you said to me, "Now, do not you are body shaming and fat shaming this woman." And I was like, "Her body is beautiful. All bodies are beautiful." But the way that she is costumed is so confusing.
66 episodes of the show, everybody.
I don't think it's a surprise that we try not to body shame or fat shame on this show.
Wow.
So anyway, her bust was distracting.
So this movie went off the rails in a number of different ways. But
so they set up Gilbert as the Cuthbert's like enemy, and Marilla would say to Anne, don't go around that Gilbert Blythe. Like he and his family, they're nothing but trouble. They have the whole thing where Anne and Gilbert are not friends because she breaks the slate over his head after he teases her about her red hair and calls her carrots. And then he saves her from the pond where she, as we all know, was playing Elaine and the boat almost went through the water and blah, blah, blah.
Even if you didn't know that, that's what happens.
That's what happens. And that leads into this sort of epilogue.
It's like the third act of the movie.
It's the third act of the movie, but it's like an excuse sort of for time to pass. And we find that they've been essentially dating and meeting in secret for like 3 years and are in love. And they always meet at this particular fence that divides their two properties. And at the end of the movie, Marilla finds out about this because Anne is seen with Gilbert. I guess after 3 years, they're not being careful to date in secret anymore at their tree. And he goes off to be a doctor, and Anne is very grown up and very beautiful, and she cuts her hair. And then it turns out that Matthew gets very sick, and Gilbert knows the only doctor that can save him, and he brings him around to the house, and he saves Matthew's life. And Marilla says, I'm going to go get that Gilbert Blythe. Guess it's fine for you to kiss him with tongues, Anne, because he's really proved himself. And then the movie ends.
Shocked me that was a line in the movie.
Yeah.
1934, pre-code.
Yes.
I mean, man, it's crazy.
It'll be all right. Let's kiss with tongues, I believe.
No, go to him. Go to him.
Go to him.
Go to him in his tongue and kiss it.
Yes, kiss his tongue.
With yours,
Is that
Anne.
how it works?
With yours, yes.
You kiss the tongue?
You kiss the tongue with the tongue.
Okay.
That's what happens.
All right.
And then the lips are there just as like backup.
I'm glad to have this explained to me.
Yeah, they're like the wingman for the tongue.
Wingman.
Jesus.
We're going to get a copyright claim from Fox.
I can't tell if our show has gotten better in 66 episodes. It's gotten more something. I'm not sure what it's more of.
It's turned more into like in Family Guy that there's just these weird flashes of like someone thinking about something very random and then you go back to the plot. That's what it makes me think of.
What you're saying is we used to control our impulses and now we just kind of say the things that come into our head?
Yeah, I mean, I just sang a song from Bob's Burgers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I think.
Oh.
Go ahead.
And this movie had Anne's fake boyfriend, Herbert Root, as we all know.
Yeah. I forgot about that part.
She makes up that she has a boyfriend who lives in Canada.
Which doesn't make much sense.
Context. He lives in Manitoba. And his name is Herbert Root, and he's a fine scholar. And then suddenly one day he shows up at the schoolhouse, and she has to admit that he wasn't really her boyfriend.
And everything seemed to be fine after that.
It was all fine. It was just a scrape. It was just like an episodic scrape that she got herself into.
If you're in middle school in Canada and you're trying to make up a boyfriend or a girlfriend, I feel like you can go in one of two directions with it. Do you either say that they're from the States? Or do you just say, is there like a Canada of Canada? Is it like one of the provinces?
I know. I think it's like, Manitoba.
Like everyone says.
Yeah, he lives in Manitoba.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. What if you're like in the biggest town in Manitoba and you have it?
You can't then.
I'll put this out there. I'll just put this into the world. And
the people in Manitoba are very honest people. So they would never.
That's where it ends. That's where the entire train ends.
That's
It
right.
ends in Manitoba because everyone is honest with each other. If you are 13 and you don't have a boyfriend, you just come right out and say,
I don't have a boyfriend.
I don't have a boyfriend.
A.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that I don't have a boyfriend.
A boyfriend.
We love our neighbors to the north.
Yes.
You know, it's weird because there's not much else to talk about with this one, because if no other version of Anne of Green Gables existed on screen, it would be like did you know there was a good movie of Anne of Green Gables in 1934? It's not super like the book. Did you know that Ellen Montgomery saw it? She saw it.
She thought it was okay.
We know what she thinks about
thought
it.
it was okay.
I'll come back to what she thinks in a minute. But yeah, there's this movie, and if it wasn't for these like way more popular and way more faithful adaptations and way more interesting adaptations later, this would be more than just a footnote. But here it stands, I would say, like a footnote.
Yeah. Well, in all seriousness, one of the problems that we see these adaptations run into again and again is the problem of casting Anne, not only because she's almost impossible to cast due to the iconicness of her character, but if you are adapting essentially the book from beginning to end, the book Anne of Green Gables, her age in that book bridges from about 12 to 16. And that is a hard gap to bridge with one actress because a 16-year-old playing 12 looks really stunted, and a 12-year-old playing 16 looks like they're playing dress up. And we have seen both of those things happen in these versions. And I will say, in the defense of the actress Anne Shirley, not to be confused with the character Anne Shirley, I thought she bridged that gap pretty beautifully. I thought she was really believable as a 13-year-old with like her braids and her straw hat. She looked young. She was super cute. Like the first shot of her on screen, I was like, oh, she's adorable. Like she's real cute. And then when she's like 16 and she's wearing her hair very differently, she's dressed very differently. They dress her, you know, in a more mature style. I felt that she was believable as like a 16 to 18-year-old as well. I liked this actress in this part. I thought she was good. I thought she was believable. I thought she was really cute, really spunky. The style of acting is not like stilted 1930s child acting, which you can see in this movie because you can see it in Diana, who ironically was like 23.
Yeah.
She's very natural. I just thought she was really good in this part, especially for the time.
I also thought she was really good. I think it's worth saying that this is such a subjective thing. I think you and I kind of perceive the ages a little bit differently, where like you see her as actually bridging it really well. To me, she looked 20 the entire time. And it's a personal reaction to it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I think we just had very different reactions to a lot of these versions because we perceived them very differently.
Yeah.
But I thought her acting was really, really good. She had the right personality for it that I really appreciated.
Yeah.
Actually, can I just...
because she was not 20, she was 16.
Totally.
Just to be totally clear. Like if you're saying she looked old for 16, like that's totally fine, but she was only 16.
No, I get that. I get that. I'm saying she looked old for 16.
That's fine.
To me. But I think it's worth talking about before we move on. I think it's worth talking about the rest of the cast because that's the only thing. You know, kind of like how this movie is this pretty good footnote. All the actors are pretty good. You know, Diana, maybe she's not the best.
She's not great.
She's a little stilted. I think Helen Wesley as Marilla's good.
She's okay.
She's not like a really, really good version of Marilla Cuthbert, but she's good. She's
not like a revolutionary version of Marilla Cuthbert. Like she's a perfectly serviceable version of Marilla Cuthbert.
Perfectly serviceable.
Yes.
I think Opie Heggie as Matthew Cuthbert is very good. He's a little more confident than I would expect for Matthew.
Yeah, he does a lot of reverse psychology. He sort of has this one trick that keeps working, so he keeps doing it.
No, it doesn't keep working. He tries it on Marilla and it doesn't work, but then he goes up to Anne like immediately after and it does work.
It only works on a child.
And he's really proud of himself because he knows how to trick a child.
That's right.
But I think he's good in this. Sarah Hayden is Rachel Berry. She's good. Like she's a good Rachel. She's a really bad Mrs. Berry. But as we cover, like she's not in this at all.
Yeah, that's fine. Doesn't matter.
So the lady not appearing in this film is I'm going to go ahead and say that the lady not appearing in this film, what's Diana's mom's name?
Mrs. Berry. No, it is.
Does she have a first name?
I don't think so. I literally...
I was like embarrassed that I didn't know, and now I feel
earlier
fine.
in the episode said Mrs. Berry, first name not given.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So Mrs. Lind, I guess, would be the character that they created and then cut from this.
Yeah, so there's no Mrs. Lind.
Yeah.
It's only Mrs. Berry. There is no Lind, there is only Berry.
So, yeah, she's not in this. And what we are left with is this weird, serviceable Anne of Green Gables that has some stuff in it that's really good and has some stuff in it that is not really going to stick around for a long time. And Ella Montgomery saw it That's still weird to me.
Yeah.
But now I think it's worth it to, like, before we move on to, because we're going straight to the 70s now, I think it's worth it to talk about some of the lost or not easily available on the internet ands that we didn't watch.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so we need to go back for a second because in 1919 there was a silent movie. 15 years before the one we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
A couple things about it. It is lost to time. That is something we cannot get it, even if we tried. A bunch of stuff about it. Did you know where it takes place?
Canada?
No, it doesn't take place in Canada.
Texas.
It takes place in New England.
Cool.
Yeah, I think maybe it had like a Little Women vibe going on or something like that. Apparently, one of the reviews of it like praised its New England authenticity.
Oh, good.
Like clearly they'd never read the book, but they were like, it clearly grabs the authenticity of New England from the book.
That's funny because there was a more recent version that I actually wrote down. Did they get this mixed up with Little Women? So we may be honing in on a theme here.
Right. Do you know who hated it?
Ella Montgomery.
She sure did, because she saw it, because she was alive then. So this is actually something she wrote about the 1934 version. She wrote in her diary that it was 1,000 times better than the 1919 version, but still it was, quote, so entirely different from my vision of the scenes and the people that it did not seem like my book at all.
That's fair.
I mentioned I would say that. Like, she liked the 1934 one. She thought it was okay, but still had a lot of problems with it. Imagine what she thought of the 1919 one.
Well, she probably didn't like it that they said it in not her country that she wrote about in her book.
She was deeply offended by it. So we didn't watch that one. Another one we didn't watch was Anne of Windy Poplars, which was 1940. It was a sequel to the 1934 Anne of Green Gables. It's not really super available. And also, we didn't really go into a lot of the sequels because the thing that we were looking at so much in this episode was like, how do these different adaptations handle the fundamentals?
Mm-hmm.
How do they handle the characters? How do they handle Anne's introduction to Green Gables? And all of the sequels can go off in so many different directions. And also, we only have so much time.
Right.
So we focused on the kind of original, like, introductory stories.
Yes, because Anne of Windy Poplars is itself a sequel that Ellen Montgomery wrote to Anne of Green Gables. But we have no idea how close that movie version was to the actual book that exists.
No. There's no way we could find out ever.
No.
I don't think it's lost to time. I just don't think it's super easy to get.
Great.
There was a 1952 BBC series that it does not seem to be available anywhere.
It seems like they made a bunch of TV miniseries of out of copyright things in the like 50s and 60s on the BBC that are completely lost to time.
Yeah.
Because I was looking at it for both Pride and Prejudice and Little Women, and both of them are like, yeah, this does not exist anymore.
It's a shame.
Yes.
Or is it? I don't know.
I don't know.
It's hard to say.
We don't know. It could have been great. Could have been terrible.
I'm really bummed that we can't watch the 1956 made-for-television musical. That just is not, that's not a thing, because it's not the musical. It's not Anne of Green Gables, the musical, because that premiered in 1965.
In Charlottetown.
Did you know that it's Canada's longest running main stage musical production?
I did. I
Yeah.
did know that, actually.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah. Didn't watch it. Stage play.
No.
Stage plays are weird for us. They're a little hard.
Yeah.
There was a 1972 another British miniseries, which is not available, and it's a bummer because it was followed in 1975 by a sequel, Anne of Avonlea, which is available. It's like on YouTube. But it seems weird to watch a sequel without seeing like Anne getting to Green Gables.
Sure.
It seems weird.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you've alluded to it a little bit. Like, what is Anne like as a grown-up versus what she's like as a little girl?
Well, so Anne of Avonlea is the second book in the series. Anne of Avonlea is a very good book. That's about her teaching school in Avonlea after attending teachers college, and then she goes to real college, and that's Anne of the Island, and then she gets engaged to Gilbert and goes off to become the principal of a high school, and that's Anne of Windy Poplars, and then they get married and go set up house together while Gilbert becomes a doctor, and that's Anne's House of Dreams, and she has her first baby at the end of, she has her first baby in the middle of Anne's House of Dreams, and her first baby dies, and it's really, really sad. It's a really, really sad chapter. And then at the end of Anne's House of Dreams, she has her oldest child who does live, Jem. And that's sort of the bridge between the Anne of Green Gables books that I like and the ones that I don't. Because once she has children, she becomes just kind of like a boring mom. She kind of does the Jo March thing where she's like, well, you know, I do my writing on the side, you know, as a little bit of a hobby, but like really I just find my greatest fulfillment in being a mother. And like just for a character that was set up as being so quirky and unusual and wonderful and ahead of her time, and you know, just this thunderbolts shooting star type person, to just sort of be like, no, I'm just you know, I'm just Mrs. Dr. Blythe, you know, he's my husband, he's the doctor in the town. It's disappointing for me That's how I feel.
I feel really bad about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I will say, hold on to that feeling because it might come up in a minute. Getting back to the list, the 1972 British miniseries is not available, which is a bummer. Anne of Green Gables, the musical, which we did not watch. So there was Anne of Green Gables, the animated series, which we didn't watch because apparently it's like only on like low printed DVDs. It's hard to get. I don't feel that bad about not watching it only because it seems like kind of it's Anne of Green Gables in name only. Like it has the characters, but what it's trying to do is something that's very different than tell the story of Anne of Green Gables, because it seems like it's very much we're going to teach a lesson in every episode about something. We're going to use either one of her adventures. Okay, so let me read you the synopses of 2 episodes of Anne of Green Gables, the animated series.
Is it like VeggieTales?
I mean, a little bit. I'm assuming it's less Christian. So better, kind of by definition,
I guess,
than VeggieTales.
Oh, let's not offend people.
I have deep problems with VeggieTales. I do not mind offending. I don't mind offending people who are very devout Christians on the basis of the quality of VeggieTales.
That's fair. That's fair.
My criticism is kept to that.
I think I took that as you saying that like all stories that were like Christian parables were bad.
No.
Okay.
I'm totally no. That's not a thing at all.
Okay.
But here are 2 episodes. One of them is going to sound familiar. One of them won't. Episode 1 was called The Witch of Avonlea.
Okay.
Anne is in a spelling. You tell me when things sound familiar and when they stop sounding familiar.
Okay.
Anne is in a spelling bee.
Familiar.
But she loses her spelling ability after being supposedly cursed by Peg Bowen and fears losing after Miss King stresses the importance of winning.
No.
She eventually learns the value of self-confidence and discovers curses are silly superstitions.
No.
The next episode, number 2, is called Carrots.
Familiar.
Anne's sick of Gilbert calling her red hair carrots and decides to dye it.
I mean, yeah, he does that.
But
he only does it once, but
Yeah.
yes, she does dye her hair.
Familiar. But it goes horribly wrong and she dyes her hair green.
Yes, she does do that.
After talking to her imaginary friend Dryad about her situation, Anne realizes that her red hair is part of what makes her unique and she should be proud to show it off.
No.
That's not the lesson at all.
It's not the lesson.
So
not.
We didn't watch Anne the animated series. I don't feel that bad about it. It's going to come up later when we talk about the 85 Anne.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where I'm going to leave it. There were a bunch that we couldn't watch, or we could have, but it was too hard, so we didn't do it. And that brings us to 1979. And I think we need to go to Japan.
I've never been to Japan.
I've never been to Japan either. I want to go. We need to talk about Anne in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Anne is big in Japan.
We learned when we went to Prince Edward Island that Anne is big in Japan. And there were lots of Japanese tourists there on buses everywhere we went. And at one point, I think we asked someone, hey, what's up with that? Because Prince Edward Island is not an easy place to get to from Boston. Never mind from Japan. That's far. It's a far way.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer that we were given was like slightly unsatisfying. They were like, oh, yeah, no, it's really popular over there. They like read it in school. And we were like, okay. So it sounds like you found out more information about Anne in Japan.
Yes, I did find out a bit more. So I found a couple of really good articles that I'm going to link to about kind of why Anne is so big, kind of how she got so big, and also why. One is objective, the other one's probably a little subjective.
Gotcha.
So one of the big reasons is that Anne of Green Gables was first translated by an author named Hanako Muraoka. I'm going to do my best to pronounce the names. In 1952. And that's kind of where it started. So it was like basically someone had it during World War II, but they kind of kept it down. They kept it low key because it was English literature and it just was kind of frowned upon, and they translated it and it got big. That's kind of the how is the thing that's more subjective.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anyone knows exactly why Anne is big in Japan, but I did read from someone an interesting theory about that. And it goes back to what you were saying about what happens to Anne in her life. After she's weird, because then after she's weird, she gets really normal.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, the idea is she acts out to a point, but she never really transgresses fully. So she still does the right thing and becomes a family person by the end, but she shows a lot of personality and is very cute along the way.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very easy thing to get into. It's not very offensive. It doesn't really offend like traditional like family norms or stereotypes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. One thing that like I cannot speak to, I can't speak to a lot of this stuff from a position of authority, but someone was talking about one of the things that makes it so big is that so much of the first book is really focused on things that are cute, which is like something that is a big part of a lot of pop culture in Japan, is that things are small and cute and whimsical.
Yeah,
and
kawaii.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that in Anne of Green Gables. So I think people have kind of thought that it's that combined with the fact that even though she is this kind of like accidental feminist character, she never really goes so far as to say, well, I'm not going to get married and I'm not going to have a bunch of kids and I'm not going to settle down and be normal.
Yes.
Because she does do all those things.
That.
I found it fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, we won't know, but I really like those. I find those fascinating as ideas as to why she is so big in Japan.
Yeah, it's like transgressive enough to be interesting, but not enough to be dangerous.
Yeah. But anyway, she's big in Japan.
Cool.
Which is super cool.
That's fun.
And this was born out in 1979. I mean, this is one of the things that was like built on her growing popularity, but also probably was one of the things that made her even more popular and made her have like a theme park that unfortunately closed in like the 90s, which is a shame. It's still there.
Terrible shame.
Yeah, but like someone from Prince Edward Island described going and being like, this is crazy because it feels like I'm in Cavendish.
That's really
weird. And
weird.
it's like a replica of Green Gables. It's very strange. There was a show that came out called Akage no An, which means red-haired Anne. It's been translated as just Anne of Green Gables, but red-haired Anne is what she is known as in Japan. It ran for 50 episodes in 1979. It was edited together into a theatrical movie called Akage no An Green Gables Enomichi, or Anne of Green Gables Road to Green Gables, which is redundant in English, but that's not the point, so that's fine.
That's fine.
It was actually, it wasn't like widely available, but then it was screened at Studio Ghibli in 2010, which makes sense because Hayao Miyazaki worked on it in 1979. It was written and directed by a guy named Isao Takahata, and Hayao Miyazaki apparently did a lot of the layout for it. But it is a show that he was involved in. What did you expect when you knew that there was an anime, a 50-episode anime about Anne of Green Gables? What kind of vibe did you expect from it?
I expected something more along the lines of the anime Little Women that we watched.
Yeah.
Which was kind of
low rent.
Yeah, and a little bit over the top and had some weird plot points and some really strange things like that the girls all bow to each other and and that like remember that really weird plot line where they like save an escaped slave and like the animation of a black person is not amazing.
Nope.
That was kind of what I expected. What we got was much more similar to The Secret World of Arietti,
which we just talked about. And many other things from Studio Ghibli.
This series, okay, so you said it was 50 episodes. The book Anne of Green Gables is 38 chapters.
Yep.
And we didn't watch the whole thing. I just want to be clear from the outset. We watched like the first 6 or 7 episodes, and they're about 25 minutes each. Each episode is a chapter of the book. And I presume that some of the chapters are like split into 2 episodes, or they make up additional things that happen later since there's 50 episodes and only 38 chapters. But imagine the length of time it would take someone to read you a chapter of a book, right? It would take like 20 minutes. It's got a lot of detail. It's got a lot of dialogue. It's a lot of back and forth, but it would be much slower paced than you would be used to an episode of a TV show being, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's what this is. Each episode of this show is like someone reading you a chapter of the book in Japanese and seeing that animated in front of you. It's got basically all the dialogue. It's got some narration, not a lot, but it's just a lot of really atmospheric just shots of people walking, leaves blowing, people talking to each other with lots of back and forth. Sometimes there's songs that weren't translated, so we were not to know what they were about, but they were very nice. And it is the most calming, relaxing thing you can possibly imagine.
Yeah.
It's just quite lovely.
I kind of loved this show.
It's great. We're going to keep watching it.
Yeah, and again, I say we focused on the fundamentals, so we only talked about the first, we only watched the first 7 episodes because those first 6 episodes were the ones that were turned into the movie.
Right.
So as long as we can watch that movie. So we haven't yet seen Gilbert Blythe. We haven't met Diana yet.
Yeah, no, literally, like, just hold that in your mind. We're 7 episodes in, and actually we were 6 episodes in, and it hadn't yet even been determined whether she was staying at Green Gables or not. That's the pace of this TV series.
That's determined in episode 6.
That's right. That's right.
We went and watched episode 7 too. We just want to keep watching it. It's really good. But I think we should dig into it a little bit more. There are a couple of things that the show does so beautifully that I really, really loved. One of the things that I was really surprised by just in episode 1 was just how sophisticated the storytelling was.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things where I feel like what normally happens in these shows is we either meet the Cuthberts first or we meet Anne first.
Mm-hmm.
This one really cuts back and forth between them. We see Anne's journey to Avonlea at the same time as we see Matthew and Marilla kind of getting ready to go get the kid. And it's really cutting back and forth in a very, as I say, sophisticated way. The storytelling is really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
That worked for me right off the bat. The calm manner of it, how well all the characters are drawn, everyone, I mean in a figurative way,
Mm-hmm.
but also how they're drawn in a literal way.
Yeah, they're very nicely drawn.
Matthew
very consistently
is
drawn.
amazing.
Yeah,
he has
he's
the
great.
most glorious mustache I have ever seen on an animated character. He's incredible. And Anne looks perfect. I mean, she looks exactly like the type of Anne that we were describing that we assume people love in Japan, which is like the cutest Anne you can possibly imagine, right? Like little short red pigtails and gigantic eyes. If that's what a different culture who has different ideas of what like animated characters look like, if that's what they see in their head when they're reading the book, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Can I say another thing that I loved about it?
Yeah.
In every version, we are told that Anne has a really active imagination, right? How are we shown that Anne has an active imagination in like the other versions that we watch?
She just talks a lot.
Right?
She talks a lot.
Which is a good way to do it. It's not like that's bad. That's how it's done in the book.
Mm-hmm.
In this one, though, how do they show that she has an active imagination?
Well, it's a lot easier to show someone imagining something when you're using animation.
Yes.
So they animate it.
Yeah. Like when she's taking her first ride to Green Gables with Matthew in the cart from the train station, we get to see exactly what she's seeing. And it's like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Like flower petals floating everywhere, little cherubs inside every flower.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's so good. And the moments like that happen throughout the show where we just have the time to sit with this character in silence and see the way she sees the world.
Yes. Like, as I say, basically in real time. Like, we're 7 episodes in. We have not met any of the other school children. We haven't met like Miss Stacy. We haven't met we haven't met Diana, we haven't met Gilbert. Like, we don't know who any of those people are.
Yeah.
So this is really just based on like Matthew, Marilla, Anne, and Mrs. Lind.
Like, if you had asked me before we watched any of this, like, what is the longest piece of media that I can think of that is retelling a book? And I probably would have said, I don't know, season 1 of Game of Thrones. Because season 1 of Game of Thrones tells the entire story of the first book in 10 one-hour episodes. 10 hours to tell the story of a book is a big thing.
And it's a long book.
This is 25 hours to tell one book. And we've looked at all of the plot synopses, so we know it goes off in its own direction a little bit.
A little bit, but it comes back around. Like, it's pretty accurate.
It's Anne of Green Gables.
Yeah.
It's kind of brilliant. It's amazing. And it's not like super easy to get. We were able to get it to watch for the show.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy we did. As you say, we are going to keep watching it. I wish there was more to talk about with it. I just think that the thing that struck me throughout the entire show, I asked you about this while we were watching it, like, because I was trying to find the right words for it. And I think you hit on the right one. One of the reasons why this works so well and why these really slow paced scenes can work in animation when really in live action they're much harder, and a lot of times we kind of lose them. Like, it is interesting that we just did The Borrowers and we just got to talk about a book with multiple live action adaptations, and there is also a movie from Studio Ghibli, and there is an anime that tells that story as well, and there's really common things where we see things happening very slowly, but in the live action ones it's really boring, but in Secret World of Arrietty it was really engaging. So I was trying to figure out why that is, and I think you hit on it, which is that it all comes down to intentionality. If you're doing live action, it is very easy to shoot actors walking over the course of 30 seconds or a minute. You know, you say, there's point A, there's point B, walk over to point B, and we're going to pan the camera.
Right.
It's not much harder to shoot that than it is to shoot a dialogue scene or an insert or something like that. But in animation anything you do has to be incredibly intentional.
Right, because you're not going to take the time and effort that it takes to animate a scene if that scene is not important.
Yeah.
Right?
Some of my favorite scenes in the show were Anne washing the dishes.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible. It's really incredible. I wish I could say more about it.
Yeah,
it's just
great.
this beautiful, perfect little animated show that I think anyone who's a fan of Anne of Green Gables and hasn't seen it should really seek it out because it was an amazing thing to watch. This comes back to something that I'll probably mention more in the episode. Anne of Green Gables has come to mean something more to me now than it did 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was born out here. I didn't know that I wanted to see Anne's story told this way, but I found it so utterly engaging. And the thing that made it so engaging is that I really care about Anne and Marilla and Matthew.
Mm-hmm.
And this gave me so much time to just exist with them in their world.
One might almost say scope for imagination.
Yes, one might.
One might.
You did.
I did.
So that was 1979's Akage no Anne, Red-Haired Anne. Then we move on to 1985. And apparently there was some miniseries that's like, I don't know. Was it popular?
I mean, beloved.
We covered it in detail in the first episode.
Yeah, we covered it in great detail. This is the Megan Follows 1985 Canadian version.
So this is the one that was written and directed by Kevin Sullivan. Kevin Sullivan has turned Anne of Green Gables into that's his thing.
It's a cash cow.
That is his industry at this point. So he made Anne of Green Gables. He then made Anne of Green Gables. It was the sequel to Anne of Green Gables. I can't remember what it was called.
It's called Anne of Green Gables, the sequel. It's Anne of Avonlea.
Right.
Yeah.
He made Anne of Green Gables, the continuing story. Which book was that based on?
None.
He made Road to Avonlea, which we don't need to spend a ton of time talking about. I talked about it in episode 1. I watched the shit out of it when I was a kid on the Disney Channel, not knowing that it had anything to do with Anne of Green Gables.
So weird to me.
I thought Green Gables was the town, and I thought, this is Avonlea. I didn't know it had anything I just didn't know it had anything to do with it, but I loved that show. Can't remember a single episode of it, but I know I watched every episode. So he did all of those. Also, Sullivan Entertainment did Anne of Green Gables, the animated series that we did not watch. That includes things like A Witch.
Oh my God.
So this is his thing. For better or for worse.
I mean,
let's talk about for worse for a second. What are the aspects of all of these things that I just mentioned that are like generally not regarded as being that essential? Like, I feel like Anne the Continuing Story is not regarded as being essential.
No, Anne the Continuing Story is like Godfather 3 of Anne of Green Gables.
Yeah, but he also did Anne of Green Gables, A New Beginning, which we didn't watch.
We didn't watch that.
Which was like, so he recast Barbara Hershey as Anne, Shirley MacLaine's in it, and the thing is, like, it takes place when Anne's older, Gilbert's dead.
Oh, jeez.
Which I don't know why that's a thing people want to do.
It's really upsetting. They want to kill off Gilbert all the time.
And then it also flashes back to when she was a little girl going to Anne of Green Gables. Going to Green Gables of Anne. And he did all of these different things, but like, which are the ones that you think are essential? What did he make that is essential to this version of Anne?
Anne of Green Gables.
Yes.
And Anne of Green Gables, the sequel, which we did not watch for this, and I haven't seen in a long time, but I remember it being very good.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd say maybe Road to Avonlea a little bit.
Yeah, but that has nothing to do with Anne of Green Gables. Like, it's the
But
town
it's good.
Avonlea. I'm sure that it is, but like, it is not related to the book Anne of Green Gables in any way.
I guess what I'm saying is, like, what did he bring to the world that is generally regarded as good?
Sure.
And Road to Avonlea ran for a really long time, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Great.
It gave us there's a cerern actor that pops up later that
There
was
it
in
is.
this show.
I mean, this is like now the Law and Order of Canada. Like, every actor has been in the Road to Avonlea.
God, anytime we watch anything that has British actors in it, what are the two shows that always pop? It's like EastEnders and The Bill.
Yeah.
I've heard of EastEnders. Is The Bill just like Law and Order? Like British Law and Order?
I think so. And then if you go back to the 70s, it's like Doctor Who and
well, that's the impossible thing with Doctor Who is it'll say that they were in Doctor Who, but you go, well, they're in their 60s.
Which one?
Which one?
Yeah.
When? Who can say?
Right.
Yeah. So, but coming back to 1985's Anne of Green Gables, can I just like recap really quickly what my reaction was to this when we watched it 3 years ago?
Sure.
Never having seen it. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. That was my reaction then.
We rewatched it. What was your
rewatched it.
reaction this time?
It's really good.
Yeah, of course it is.
Like, it's really good.
Of course it is.
I don't love it, but I really liked it.
Of course it's really good.
And there were some things, how many times in the first 10 minutes did I stop you and say, okay, this is actually brilliant, and I didn't appreciate it?
Like, multiple times.
The whole beginning is just so well plotted.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You mean the sort of prequel?
Yes. Yeah, the little bit before she actually leaves when we see her and the family beforehand. I know everyone talks about this. I'm a big believer in show don't tell,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't appreciate this at the time. Probably because I'm still not amazing at this, but this was definitely one of the times when I didn't read the book before we watched all of the adaptations.
Mm-hmm.
And so I watched it first and then read the book, and it didn't really hit. But like, Anne just talks about what her life was like. We never really get to see it. In this, though, I think they make a really good decision, which is we need to see what Anne's life was like beforehand, and we need to make like two big choices that are going to show how hard her life is. We need to do them in the first 6 or 7 minutes, and that is going to make the audience side with our adorable character, Anne Shirley.
Yes.
And the two choices they have are book burning and death.
Yeah.
Those are the things she witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't appreciate it at the time. I appreciate it now.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is pretty, at least at the beginning especially, is pretty brilliantly written.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great.
Are there a whole bunch of people that have like already figured that out and are kind of, I'm not going to say they're happy that I finally jumped on the bandwagon.
Everybody's sold on Anne of Green Gables.
On the 1985 one.
Everyone, every person.
It's really good. What do you like about it? How do you feel about the fundamentals?
I think it's fantastic. I mean, Megan Follows is Anne to so many people. She is so iconic as this character. And I know when we watched it originally, and even again this time, like you thought you had a little bit of a problem with her age. You thought she looked a little too old. I think she's fine. Like, I think she does a good job. I think I appreciated her and Diana on this viewing a little bit more than I used to. I never used to love Skylar Grant, and I think she's kind of grown on me as Diana.
Wait, not Skylar Grant, not great niece of Katharine Hepburn,
yes,
Skylar Grant.
Indeed. Yes, indeed.
What a thing.
And an American.
What a fact.
To boot.
Almost Anne of Green Gables herself.
Yes.
But because she's American, they were not allowed.
Rudely.
So instead they cast a tiny redhead.
Tiny redhead.
Is more appropriate.
Yeah.
She's so tiny.
She just like that, like, just for some reason on this viewing, she just really grew on me. And the other person that, again, like, you didn't love, I think, originally is Colleen Dewhurst as Marilla, who I think is great. Like, she's a very different Marilla from Geraldine James, who I know you have, like, a mad affinity for.
Yes.
But she is certainly a strong second for me.
I agree with that.
And I mean, if I picture Marilla in my head, honestly, like, this is just because this is like what I grew up with.
Yeah.
Like, this is the person that I'm picturing. Okay, so I've been watching, I found a YouTube channel that's every Tony Awards ceremony, like from every one that was televised, like the entire thing. I don't know where this person got their hands on these, but from like the 1960s onward. And some of them are like so old that they're hard to watch, but I've been watching like the 80s onward. It's nice to watch something that's in the past.
Back when people could gather in crowds.
Yes. But Colleen Dewhurst, I didn't know this. Colleen Dewhurst was president of Actors Equity for many years. So she's all throughout these Tony Awards coming on and making speeches and doing things. She is a beautiful, elegant, like, stunning older woman. I did not know that because I only really know her as Marilla from Anne of Green Gables. Like, the transformation that she has done to herself in this series is actually pretty fascinating. Like, I guess I just assumed like this is who she was and it wasn't a lot of acting, but this is very pure acting.
I have a question.
Yes.
When you first watched this, how old were you, would you say, when you first watched it?
Oh, I don't know, like 10, 11, 12.
Would you say those are the years that you kind of grew to love it?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. How did you feel about Colleen Dewhurst as Marilla at that time? I'm assuming you really liked her.
Yeah, of course.
How did you feel about Richard Farnsworth as Matthew at that time?
Really liked him.
How do you feel about Colleen Dewhurst as Marilla now?
Still really like her.
It seems even more.
Yeah.
It seems like you've only grown to appreciate her over the years. How do you feel about Richard Farnsworth as Matthew?
You ruined it for me.
Sorry.
Because once you pointed out that he was doing a Texas cowboy thing, I could not stop hearing it.
As American as the day is long.
Yeah.
This poor Canadian farmer who...
And also your mocking of his death scene.
It's terrible. It's really terrible. It's the most violent... it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Nothing's perfect.
Yeah, nothing's perfect. Nobody's perfect.
No perfect thing is perfect. And maybe this Anne of Green Gables is a perfect version of Anne of Green Gables, but that part's not perfect. Mm-hmm. His Matthew it just doesn't do anything for me.
It just didn't work for you. That's okay.
Yeah, he's just kind of there. He's reading all the lines. He's very sweet. He's a very sweet old man. He's too old. It's a whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, I just feel like I'm just kind of going to take the piece as a whole because I can't really separate all the pieces out having been exposed to it at such a young age.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of my feeling. The only thing that I have a problem with, have always had a problem with, and will continue to have a problem with forever and ever is Anne's blue dress.
With the puffy sleeves.
With the puff sleeves.
From 1985.
It's so hideous. It's so hideous. And on this viewing, I pointed out to you that Diana was also wearing a dress with puff sleeves that was quite lovely. But standing next to Anne, Anne just looks ridiculous in that dress. It's a terrible dress. It is a 1980s puff sleeve. And I can tell you that, having now watched many awards ceremonies that took place in the 80s, it looks just like that. Really bad. Really bad. I hate that blue dress. Also, it's supposed to be brown, but that's okay.
I'm so sorry.
Hate that blue dress.
I think I want to dig in a little bit, though, on someone who we've brought up already. I want to talk more about his character. I want to talk more about Gilbert Blythe.
Now, this is... we got to tread lightly here.
Yeah.
Because Jonathan Crombie is extremely beloved as this character. Also R.I.P. So
yeah,
we just let's be gentle with him.
Can I just say where I'm coming from on this?
Yes.
I have a favorite Anne.
Yes.
I have a favorite Marilla.
Yes.
I have a favorite Matthew.
Yes.
I don't have a favorite Gilbert.
Yeah.
I have maybe two Gilberts who I think embody different aspects of the character really well. And one of them is Jonathan Crombie.
Yeah.
I think he was very, very good. So I have not come to shit on Jonathan Crombie.
Yes.
At all. Very good Gilbert. I think the history books will show. But why is he so hard to get right? Because I don't think anyone ever has.
No. Well,
maybe some have gotten him more right than others.
Yeah, I mean, I think he is hard to get right because he has to be good enough for her, and he's not good enough for her.
Well, how hard a tightrope to walk is that, where he has to be a shit to her, but also at the same time, you have to, as an audience, you have to think he's good enough for her.
Yeah. Well, I was working, so I have a story that I think may help shed some light on this.
I'll pull up a chair.
When I lived in New York, I was working on a production of As You Like It, which is a show by Shakespeare. And the main character is a character called Rosalind. She is a beloved Shakespearean heroine, and she is incredibly smart and witty and strong and brave and just the coolest person. And she falls in love with this guy, Orlando, falls in love with him at first sight. And Orlando is just not that interesting of a character. And we, the production team, all women, were really puzzled. We were like, who can we cast? What attribute does this person have to be good enough for Rosalind? Because she deserves someone that is good enough for her. And we're trying to figure out what this character needs to have. And we were at auditions, and this guy walks into the room, and he was so beautiful. And all three of us just looked at each other and we're like, don't even open your mouth. Don't say a word. You're hired. He was so gorgeous and a sweet guy, not a very good actor, a sweet man. But we basically just all looked at each other and we were like, oh, we get it. We get it.
Yeah.
We figured it out. He's really hot. But that, I think, is maybe the problem, that there's nothing in Gilbert to make him exceptional. He's a very good scholar, we know. He's always tied with Anne for first in all of their scholastic endeavors, but there's nothing about him, and he's determined. He wants to be a doctor and make the world a better place. And he's a good-looking lad, we are given to understand. But there's not that one magnetic thing about him that we, the reader or the viewer, are going, yes, he is good enough for Anne.
I would argue that there is one.
Okay.
There is one defining trait about Gilbert the character that does tell the audience, yes, he is good enough for Anne.
What is that?
Anne loves him.
Well, right.
And we trust her as a character.
Well, I suppose, except she goes on to live a really bourgeois life.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We're still just really talking about that first book here.
That's fair enough.
I'm not even saying that's the best. That's not the best way to do that.
Yeah.
But for a while, I felt like there was nothing. I don't think I really appreciated that aspect of it. But that is something.
Yeah.
And there's so many books out there that have a main character that people really identify with, and that's one of the things that makes those books last in popular culture for years and decades and centuries. Anne Shirley is one of those characters, maybe one of the best examples of those characters. People love Anne of Green Gables because they love Anne.
Yeah.
Do you think there's anyone that would say, I love Anne of Green Gables? I know people who love Buffy the Vampire Slayer and would quickly say, Buffy's not even my favorite character on the show.
Yeah, totally.
But does anybody say, I love Anne of Green Gables and say, oh yeah, I mean, I read through the parts about Anne so I can get to the parts about Diana
Right.
and Gilbert.
And Ruby Gillis.
Yeah, like no, maybe someone does, but it certainly is a vast minority of the people who would say that they're fans of the book.
Sure.
And if you have established that relationship between your character and your audience, this is what Ellen Montgomery did. You have a character that when they say, like, I am in love with this person, the audience is going to say, well, there must be something about them because I love Anne.
Yeah.
And I want her to be happy. And it seems like Gilbert makes her happy.
Yeah.
So he's great.
Yeah.
I love him.
Can I tell you who Gilbert is for me?
Who's Gilbert for you?
So when I did the, this is not a version that we examined for our podcast, but when I did the LibriVox dramatic reading, which was like one of the happiest creative endeavors I've ever embarked upon. Really, really love doing that. Still get fan mail about it, like to this day. The person we cast as Gilbert was an online friend of mine. He went by the name MB online, and
you know what online friends are called now?
Just friends.
Just friends.
Just friends.
Yeah.
And I don't know anything about him other than I know what his voice sounds like because we did so many things together through LibriVox, and he's got a very distinctive voice, and it's the kind of thing where it's like at first I didn't love it, and then as I got to know him, I really enjoyed it and cast him as Gilbert in my Anne of Green Gables. And he's Gilbert for me.
Yeah.
Like he's my Gilbert. Like I love him and treasure him. Like that was such a cool, that's Gilbert for me. Like just the sound of this person's voice.
Well, I think that's a perfect encapsulation of probably what a lot of these creators are going through when they find the person that they say is like, they found the perfect version of that character in a specific actor. They did it because they were the one casting it. And we get to, it gives us a window into what that creator sees as that character.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what led Richard Farnsworth to being cast as Matthew, but I think the question comes up, is that version of Matthew, is that what Kevin Sullivan saw in the book? Is that Matthew to him?
Yeah, clearly.
And it's just a fascinating thing because you can look at every single character that way. And Gilbert is very bland and very handsome.
Yeah.
He's the cutest Gilbert.
He's the cutest Gilbert.
Of all of them.
Yeah.
Definitely the cutest.
And he really loves Anne a lot.
Yeah, the thing that I'm missing in him is like a fire in his belly.
Yeah, he doesn't have that.
He doesn't have that.
He's very Canadian.
He's very white bread. Canadian white. He's very Canadian white bread. And he's fine.
Yeah.
He's fine and handsome. And then Sullivan killed him off in Anne of Green Gables: A New Beginning.
Yeah, and then he died for real a couple of years ago.
I know.
It's really sad.
But he's a good Gilbert.
Yeah.
He really is.
Yeah.
This is a good Anne of Green Gables.
Very good.
If this was the last version of Anne of Green Gables that was made and we didn't get any more post-1985, we would look at it and go, man, that 1934 movie's interesting. Oh, and the Japanese cartoon is actually like beautiful in certain ways. But if you're looking for just a live-action version of Anne of Green Gables, the 1985 version is pretty great. You really can't go wrong with it.
Yes.
But I will tell you that a couple of people thought, well, we can do better. And this was 30 years later.
Yeah.
2016. Over the course of the 20-teens, there were a few people who were trying to make a new Anne of Green Gables TV show. And it was going through a lot of different things, and eventually they succeeded. Not in a TV show. We're not going to talk about Anne with an E right now.
We will in a minute.
We are going to talk about maybe the most offensively titled version that we looked at. Not red-haired Anne, reducing her to just one physical attribute, calling her freckled Anne or something like that. More offensive than that. What is the title of 2016's version called?
In the grand tradition of Bram Stoker's Dracula and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, this is Ellen Montgomery's Anne of Green Gables.
Why do you think that I might find that offensive?
Because it was not good.
It's not good. It's not good. And Ellen Montgomery is we're not talking about Shakespeare. We're not talking about Louisa May Alcott. This is a creator who actually had the chance to see her creation brought to life on the screen.
Yes.
We know what her opinions were. We know what she thought about her work being adapted into something. And they go and they pull some shit like this, telling me that this is Ellen Montgomery's Anne of Green Gables. I was talking before about how apparently I really like Anne of Green Gables and have grown to kind of love Anne of Green Gables over the last few years. That's borne out in the fact that I could not stand this version.
So this version of Anne of Green Gables, to bring it back to our podcast, was the reason that we were not doing exhaustive sweeps of everything when we started this podcast, because I said to Jeremy, oh, there's this one on PBS from 2016. I watched the first 10 minutes of it at one point and it was so bad I turned it off. So we're not going to watch that for the podcast. And he was like, okay. So now.
Okay. That's fine.
So now we've come full circle.
We watched it together.
So they made 3 of these. We watched the first one in its entirety. It was an hour and a half movie. And skipped through the second 2 because honestly,
Anne of Green Gables, The Good Stars, and Anne of Green Gables, Fire and Dew.
To be honest, because I thought they were like not based on Anne of Green Gables, the book, and were just new plots with those characters. And I was like, we don't have to watch them. It actually turned out that they were like the second and third parts of the book, and we probably should have watched them, but we did not. They were so bad.
Again, I bring it back to the fundamentals.
Yes, we have enough to talk about.
We did not need to watch these to know what we didn't like about this world, this version of Green Gables, this horrible mirror universe where everyone in Green Gables doesn't make sense and everything's turned upside down.
Okay.
And Matthew Cuthbert,
he's the president
of the goddamn United States of America. This is a man who should... Okay, hang on. Let me... So this was directed by John Kent Harrison. John Kent Harrison directed one other thing that we've talked about on this show. He directed A Wrinkle in Time, not the super cool progressive one that's like one of the most intelligent movies I've ever seen about loving yourself that made me cry and was the best movie of its year. Fight me. Not that one. He directed the TV version.
He directed Charles Wallace.
Charles Wallace,
no.
No, he directed the one that has a Pegasus on the cover of the box, even though there isn't a goddamn Pegasus in the movie. John Kent Harrison is... When I say a hack, I don't mean that as a pejorative. I mean that in its real sense, which is someone who is a fucking working director.
Yes.
He is a working director. I do not think I have not seen anything that he has made that I'm not going to say I haven't seen anything good from him. I haven't seen a single thing from him that has felt good to me, that I have enjoyed. He directed this. It was written by Susan Coyne. What was the sad thing I told you about Susan Coyne when we were watching this?
Susan Coyne was one of the creators and stars of Slings and Arrows, which is one of my favorite television shows of all time.
What's Slings and Arrows about?
It's about a Shakespeare festival.
In Canada?
In Canada. It stars Paul Gross.
Is it really good?
It's really good.
I'm surprised I've never watched it because I love Kids in the Hall, and Mark McKinney was one of the co-creators of it.
We have it on DVD, and we talk about watching it probably like once a month. I say, we should really watch Slings and Arrows.
No, for the last 6 years.
For the last 6 years, yeah.
And I'm fully on board.
I know. We just haven't gotten around to it.
We got stuff going on.
Yeah.
I'll take a vacation. I'll take like a week off and we can just watch a whole bunch of stuff.
It's only 3 seasons and they're only like 6 episodes each. Like we could easily do it in a weekend.
But, as you say, is very good.
It's very good.
I've always been under the understanding that it's very good. But she wrote this. How did that make you feel to find out?
It made me feel bad.
Yeah.
I also found out that she used to be married to an artistic director in Canada. He is her ex-husband and was accused of very severe, serious, serial sexual harassment of the young women that he cast in his shows and worked with.
Oh, no.
But I don't blame Susan Coyne for that. In fact, perhaps that was why she divorced him.
Are you saying this is just another thing that you found out around the same time that made you sad?
Yes.
I'm sorry this one made you so sad.
Yes.
When we actually watched it, was it good?
No, it was poor.
It was poor.
It was poor.
Let's
dive into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, I want to talk about Anne real quick.
Okay.
This is the reason that I watched 10 minutes of it 3 years ago and turned it off. So Anne is played by a very young girl.
She looks 16. Her name's Ella Ballantyne.
She looks 12.
Yep.
Which makes it difficult later in the series when she's like dressed up like an adult.
Anne is hard to cast.
Anne is very hard to cast. I think I said this earlier. Anne spans 12 to 16 in the book Anne of Green Gables, and that is a hard bridge for any human being to look 12 and also look 16 convincingly.
If you're shooting something in the span of a couple of months.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. If you're going to do it like Boyhood style, like easy enough.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay. 2 things. 1, she's on the station platform. President Jed Bartlett shows up to get her.
I have some things to say about
in his
this.
overalls.
Who the
after
fuck?
falling in the mud for no reason.
Who the fuck is this confident guy who hangs out on a farm?
Just being cool.
It's certainly not Matthew Cuthbert.
No.
It is the worst casting I have seen. And I say that being a really big fan of the actor that they cast.
Yeah.
I love Martin Sheen.
So tragically miscast.
It would
so tragic. He's just like ordering people around with like a glance and snapping his fingers, and things are done for him because he's the fucking president.
Okay, right in the first. Okay, so you mentioned he like fell in the mud.
Yeah.
So we get some real good pratfalls in the first 5 minutes of this. He chases after a pig. He's having a lot of fun doing it. He changes his clothes, and then he gets in the carriage, and he's driving to the train station to pick up the boy.
Yep.
They think. And who sees him driving to the train to pick up the boy?
Mrs. Lind.
What? Okay. What do you think, based on reading the book and knowing the book really well and seeing so many other versions of this, how does Matthew handle himself around Rachel Lind?
Terrified of her.
Why is he terrified of her?
She's a lady, and he is afeared of women.
Really? Like, and she's not just a lady. She is a fucking battle axe.
Yeah.
She is not someone who treads through this life lightly. And that scares him a lot.
A lot.
Right? Like Marilla can stand up to her, but even she has a hard time with it.
Yeah.
Marilla's tough as nails.
And
She's a real lady.
And Matthew's afraid of Marilla, and she's his own sister.
Like, this is a guy who is afraid of the world. And what is Martin Sheen's reaction to Rachel Lind looking like prying into his life as he's driving past?
Just like blows a kiss.
He's just like, "Hello, Rachel, what's going on? How are you doing? Going to pick up a boy." Like, it's absurd.
Okay.
The thing that really pisses me off about it is that A, it's not Matthew, and B, the character they've replaced Matthew with is not compelling beyond the fact that Martin Sheen is like presidential.
Yeah.
Oh, also the thing that's changed between now and episode 1 is that I have watched all of The West Wing.
Yeah.
I've grown as a person because now I've seen all of The West Wing.
True.
And I've developed a love of Anne of Green Gables.
By the end, he's like walking with a cane because he does die in this one, like at the end of the third
he dies
movie,
in this world,
in this world, and he's like walking, he's getting older, and to show the passage of time, he's walking with a cane, and we just turn to each other, we're like, oh, it's his MS, it's acting up again.
Yeah.
Oh,
and he kept it from everybody.
Yeah.
And Anne and Marilla are both mad.
They're mad because he had to sign Anne's college document, and that was how they like got him, because like he lied on the document.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, all of Avonlea didn't really know what to do.
Yeah.
But they still reelected him to being farmer of Green Gables.
Okay. I just want to talk about Anne for a minute.
I loved when Jimmy Smith showed up. He's great.
You've gone too far.
I love Alan Alda too.
You've gone too far. I just want to talk about Anne for a minute.
Okay.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Anne of Green Gables.
Yes.
What does she look like in like a couple of words? What does Anne Shirley look like?
Well, I'll tell you this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there are any words that I could use to describe Anne Shirley that are better than the words of Miss Rachel Lind herself.
Okay.
I'm going to read this as a quote. "Well, they didn't pick you for your looks, so that's sure and certain. She's terribly skinny and homely, Marilla. Come here, child, and let me have a look at you. Lawful heart, did anyone ever see such freckles and hair as red as carrots?" You know what that is? That's essentially speak the speech, as I have written it trippingly on the tongue.
It was very trippingly.
Like, Shakespeare is using that line to tell us, in the future how he wants his own plays to be acted.
Right.
Ellen Montgomery is saying, well, if anyone has any question about what my main character looks like, I'm going to put a beautiful, awful description of her in the mouth of one of my most verbose characters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Does it say anything about eyeshadow?
None whatsoever.
Because she's wearing a lot of eyeshadow. Does it say anything about blush?
No, of course not.
She's wearing a lot of makeup. Let me ask you this.
Yes.
Does it say anything about how on top of the eyeshadow and blush that she's wearing, having freckles painted on her face with eyeliner?
No.
Because that's what's happening here.
I believe you get your ass beat for saying that you're going to paint freckles on an actress to make her look like Anna Green Gables.
What is going on with her freckles? She looks like Raggedy Ann.
This is... Okay, I think I figured this out about an hour into this version. I think I know what makes a movie like this happen. And I think it's a lack of respect.
Mm-hmm.
And not necessarily a lack of respect for the original source material. I mean a lack of respect for the audience.
Yeah.
Because I just genuinely feel like this movie was made by people who were cutting corners every chance they could and couldn't get anything ideal, like couldn't get the location they wanted, couldn't get the actors they wanted. They could get Martin Sheen, even though he's wrong for it. They couldn't get an actress who looks like Anne, but they thought, you know what? It doesn't matter. The audience won't care. We'll paint some freckles on her and it'll be fine.
Call it a day. Well,
I just find it profoundly disrespectful.
Let me give you another example. Anne is constantly talking about how she loves pink, but she can't wear pink because of her red hair.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand that because pink and orange look very nice together. But at the time, this was thought to be a thing. So she's standing outside next to Marilla and says, "Ugh, pink. I just love pink, but of course I can never wear it because of my red hair."
Well, I have a question for you, though.
Yes.
Because she was wearing a dress in that scene, as I
She
recall.
was indeed, yeah.
God, what color was that dress?
Pink.
It was fucking pink.
It's a pink dress. And I was very angry because here's the thing. Not one person on set said, "So I got a question. She's saying she can't wear pink, but her dress is pink. Could we change the line? Could we give her a different dress?" Because to me, actually, you have a really nice opportunity to get a little in-depth look into this character here, because literally all you had to do was add another sentence to that line. She says, "I can never wear pink. Pink doesn't look good on me because of my red hair. Look at me in this pink dress. We didn't have a choice in what we were given to wear at the orphanage, and that made me sad." That's all she had to say.
Yep.
That would have been so much better. Never mind just giving her a different dress. Like, she wears different dresses. Give her a different dress.
She has too many dresses in this now that I think about it.
So many dresses.
How many dresses does Anne have?
Just many dresses.
No, but I mean in the book.
Oh,
Like-
she only has the one dress.
Yeah.
When she arrives at Green Gables, you mean?
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
mean, even then, doesn't she only have like 2 or 3 or something like that?
Yeah, because Marilla makes her like three dresses, but she's only allowed to wear one of them because one's
Yeah.
for church. Anyway, people didn't have as many clothes back then.
Like, the things we're talking about right now are not things that are about the plot or characterization. They are just, I think the dress is the canary in the coal mine for this one.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is when something like that happens, you start to see it everywhere.
Yeah.
Every 30 seconds, we the audience, are being presented with something and being told it's one thing, but really it's another.
Yeah.
Can I give another example?
You can.
Okay. We talk about Gilbert a lot. In this version, they're in the schoolhouse, and Gilbert, like, the only thing Gilbert has is that he's handsome.
Yes.
That's his only thing. He's a nice kid, even though he's not at the beginning, but he's handsome. And in this version, she's in the schoolhouse, and this kid behind her, this little twerp behind her, like, says, "Hey, psst." Does he call her carrots in that scene?
I think so.
Yeah, he goes like, "Hey, psst, you with the red hair, carrots and freckles, you look stupid." And hand to God, I was positive the next words that were going to come out his mouth were, "My friend Gilbert wants to talk to you."
But instead it was Anne going, "Gilbert Blythe, you jerk," and smashing the slate over his head.
He is the twerpiest fucking kid I have ever seen in my life.
11.
And the thing is, it's not his fault for being a twerp. Kids are kids. It's the fault of whoever cast him in this. I don't know if his uncle was working on this movie or it's some relation, but like, he is not, he's so profoundly not right for this character. There's nothing about him that is Gilbert Blythe at all.
Yeah. Well, they made changes to Anne's backstory that didn't make any sense and weren't followed up on and weren't for any reason. Like, they actually did give her like a little flashback of like this bad thing that happened to her in her past, whereas in the 1985 Megan Follows version, and then the Anne with an E version that we're going to talk about in a minute, she does have these flashbacks of horrible things happening to her.
Oh, yeah.
Like, just these horrible things, these memories that come up to the surface because she's got kind of PTSD from, she had a really hard life before she came to Green Gables. And it's important that we know that.
Harder than most children.
Harder than almost any children.
Yeah.
And in this, she has this little flashback that she's like in school wearing a nice dress with other children around, and the teacher calls her to the front and he smacks her hand with the ruler. That's her bad memory.
Yeah.
She got a little smack on the hand, which is something that I don't agree with. Certainly I don't agree with corporal punishment in schools, but that was very common at the time, and every child would have had a memory of that happening to them at some point. And then at one point too, she says to Marilla, like, "Oh, my parents died when I was 5. And I was like, why would you make that change? Like, famously, Anne's parents died when she was like a little baby, and she never remembers them, and it's sort of her lifelong sorrow that she has no memory of her mother's face or voice. Why would you make that change? Just like to make it a little less sad that she was 5 when they died? Like, it's just one of those things that is for no reason and doesn't lead to anything.
Yeah.
And is confusing, actually. The acting was so poor, and the direction of how she was to act was so poor that she was like it was like a Pollyanna thing. Like, she was really, really, really sickly sweet, but it reminded me of, because we'd watched all those versions of The Bad Seed.
Yeah.
So when she was like, "Yes, Marilla, I would be delighted to learn this prayer as I walk upstairs. Yes, I'll go to my room right now. I was like, she's going to burn the house down. Like, it just made me think of the bad scene because it was so insincere. And it was like a combination, I think, of like bad child acting and bad directing. Ugh, it was really bad.
I feel bad. This comes up so many times on the show. I don't want to dunk on child actors because they're kids. They're kids. Like, she's not 10. She's like 16.
Yeah.
But it's not... I never in these situations blame the actor at all. It is never their fault. It is always casting director, producer, and director. These are the people who are at fault for this because it's their responsibility to find the best people for the job. And if you can't find the best people, you look harder.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, okay, maybe that's naive what I just said.
Yeah.
But you'd hope that they would.
Mm-hmm.
You'd hope that they would try harder or try harder to get the performance that they're looking for and use any trick they can to get the performance that they're looking for.
Or if all else fails, like choose something that you have the capacity to do. Like if you can't do Anne of Green Gables, do something else. You know what I mean? So this is a little bit of a tangent, but where I went to college, at a college that was not all women, but mostly women. And people would from time to time propose to do plays that were like an all male cast. And the directors and the professors would be like, no, you can't do Glengarry Glen Ross because we can't cast it. Like, we don't have enough men who are good at acting. It will be bad because you'll have to cast people that aren't good. We don't have like a lot to choose from. And so like, I guess I don't understand I don't know why. I don't know. They just didn't seem like they had the right. They had one good resource. They had Martin Sheen.
Mm-hmm.
So why are they doing Anne of Green Gables? Do something else that Martin Sheen will be good in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, they didn't care if it was Anne of Green Gables or another thing.
It's
right?
deeply upsetting.
It's deeply upsetting.
I mean, we could go into more detail on some of this stuff. My first note is just no to all of this. But that kind of speaks to everything. Like, we haven't even mentioned Marilla.
She's nothing. She's wearing a lot of eyeliner, though.
Yeah.
The makeup in this was distracting.
Yeah.
I don't often get distracted by makeup, but this was distracting.
It's not... I don't like being the person that watches things like this and comments on how things are shot because I usually find comments like that pretentious. But I found myself doing it a lot during this. And it really speaks to all the technical aspects of the movie because, as you say, like, the makeup is not good and really distracting. The costuming is not good and really distracting. The shooting of it is not good and really distracting. There was a background actor in one of the scenes
with the newspaper.
I loved him so much. I can't describe it with my words. I'm going to try. But it's just amazing. In one background shot, there's a guy sitting on a bench up against a building reading a newspaper, and he's just got the biggest dumb smile on his face, sitting bolt upright, holding this paper 2 feet out in front of his face.
Yeah, imagine someone sitting like with their knees at 90-degree angles to the ground, with their back not leaning against the chair, but like bolt upright, holding their arms straight out with it, holding a newspaper.
Yep.
And this guy was just in the background of the scene, stock still the entire time.
It was amazing.
I don't think he was meant to be on camera for as long as he was.
It is my favorite moment in the entire movie. It's wonderful.
It was so amazing.
It's great for Newspaper Guy.
Yeah.
I loved Newspaper Guy.
Newspaper Guy is like still not appearing in this film for everything else.
Oh, man, he's great. But yeah, like, this Anne is wrong. It's not even that she's bad. She's wrong.
Yeah.
The character is wrong. Marilla is nothing. Matthew is beyond wrong. It's terrible casting.
Diana is not very good. She
honestly,
yeah,
don't even remember her.
Yeah, she just looked like a little kid.
Yeah,
all the kids like didn't look like they were actors. Like, they looked like they just kind of got plucked out of obscurity.
Yeah, I think they had about $20 to make and that's 20 Canadian.
Yeah,
by the way.
Oh, remember the graduation scene where it was like 6 people?
Yeah, I mean, that's a problem. That's something that happens in TV shows, I feel like.
I know, but like, shoot it in such a way that like it's not so obvious.
But also all their graduation robes and everything were clearly just like polyester graduation robes that you would get anywhere now.
Yeah, like just a modern cap and gown.
They didn't make anything. They just went out and bought some stuff. I don't know if they knew that this book takes place 100 fucking years ago. It was upsetting at every moment.
Very upsetting.
And then we skipped through 2 and 3, just kind of checking, like, oh no, she dyed her hair. Okay, no, they did that. Oh, this happened. They did that. Oh, she kisses Gilbert. She does that. Oh, Matthew's dead.
Matthew's dead.
You know, they did that. He dies reading the newspaper. Like, that's That's a thing. And then she's fine. And like the one thing that we could see just visually by the end of the show is that they definitely have tried to age her up.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't work.
She looks like she's playing dress up.
Yeah, she looks like a kid. She looks like a middle school kid in a middle school play.
That's exactly what she looks like. And then Gilbert too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
because Gilbert's like, oh, I went and took that job outside of town. We're like, you're 12.
It's really not good. It was deeply disappointing and deeply frustrating. And I am so happy that I made you sit through the entire thing just for Newspaper Guy. Just for Newspaper Guy and President Farmer Jed Bartlett. He's just love the guy. Love the guy. Not his best work even a little. If you're casting Matthew Cuthbert, you don't cast someone who has authority. That's the opposite of what you want. He has no authority whatsoever. He's not fun. He's like the most insightful person in the movie. He's the one who I'm done.
Okay.
Would you like to talk about an Anne that we enjoyed much more than this one?
Yes.
We covered Anne with an E in episode number 1, and we covered it in a weird way because the show wasn't done yet. Because like one season had come out. And so like ends on a cliffhanger and all this kind of stuff. And one of the nice things about waiting 3 years to re-record this is that we could wait until Anne with an E was finished. And I feel bad saying that because I don't want Anne with an E to be finished, but it is canceled.
Yeah.
They got 3 seasons and now they are done. Can I just kind of catch us back up to speed on the particulars about Anne with an E?
Yes.
So it was created by Moira Wally Beckett. She worked on Breaking Bad for a while. She created the show Flesh and Bone. Do you remember that one?
Nope.
It's like I think it's about ballet dancers.
Huh.
She, I think, brought something very strong to the table. She wanted authenticity. That's the thing that she was looking for with this.
Yeah.
And this show has authenticity. It has darkness. It also has some very good actors that are in it, including Geraldine James as Marilla Cuthbert.
As aforesaid.
It includes Amy Beth McNulty as Anne. We talked about a lot of this stuff in the first episode, but I think we could probably split it up. Let's talk about the fundamentals of Anne with an E, and then we should talk about kind of what the experience has been watching 3 seasons of it.
Yeah.
But what do you think of the fundamentals?
Fundamentally, in terms of the cast, say, because that's very important, right? Casting.
Yeah.
I would have to say that this is one of the most perfect casts I have ever seen assembled, certainly in a television program.
Yeah.
I mean, right up there with
like 95
Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly what I was going to say. Anne is perfect. Matthew and Marilla are perfect. Mrs. Lind is perfect. Miss Stacy is perfect. And I'm literally just talking about casting. Like when I picture these people in my mind, they have found actors that embody these characters.
They're like the platonic ideal of these characters.
Yeah, especially Mrs. Lind. For whatever reason, I feel like no previous versions have gotten her right, and she is so perfect in this.
Well, I think this speaks to the thing we were just talking about with the 2016 version, that it seems like care wasn't taken. And, you see these examples of places where care wasn't taken. Like, yeah, pink dress. Like, yes, but it's an example of a lot of different things. This is one of the ones that's on the complete other end of the spectrum because every 5 minutes you get an example of something where a lot of care was taken.
Yes.
And you get the sense that they really cared about every single aspect of this show and they really wanted to get it right. And I think they did.
Yeah.
I mean, I talked about this before, but like I came to this in a weird way where I kind of watched the first season of Anne with an E, and that was like my big introduction to Anne of Green Gables. And then we watched 85 and I read the book, and then we did our episode, and now I've watched more and everything like that. So maybe what I'm about to say comes from the fact that this was my first Anne, which I think is a thing that affects a lot of people. This is the best one. Like this is the best one.
Yeah.
Full stop.
I mean, I would say, here's what I'll say. Because you just asked for like the fundamentals, right?
Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, it's the best one.
Fundamentally, it's the best one. I would say that the creators of the show were more skilled at adaptation and in casting and in crafting a world than they were in creating original plot. That's what I'm gonna say.
Well, yeah. Then we can talk about what the full 3 seasons is.
Yeah, because then we can talk about execution, but. And I think those are 2 different skills, really. Like if you handed me the book Anne of Green Gables, I think I could craft a pretty serviceable adaptation of it. I am not a writer who is skilled at like crafting plot and structure. Do you know what I mean? Like that I that's not where my skill set lies.
I mean, we talked about just to bring it back to the 95 Pride and Prejudice again. We talked about it when we did Pride and Prejudice, that like Andrew Davies has this quality where he can create something that is invented that you would swear it was in the book.
Yes.
It's crazy that it wasn't in the book.
He just has an ear for the language and the rhythm of the original text.
And I would agree with you. I don't think like Moira Walley-Beckett and the other creators of the show, I don't think they have that to the same degree.
Mm-hmm.
There are some really strong choices that they make though that are kind of brilliant.
Yeah.
Can we talk about like let's really just focus on the first 2 episodes.
Okay.
Because the first 2 episodes really are this beautiful kind of movie introduction. The first one's like a double-length episode, so it's it's a long movie. Anne comes to Green Gables, and by the end of the second episode, they have decided that they are keeping her.
Yes.
These are all the things that happen. She meets Diana, like this we get all the big things.
She thinks she's being sent away, then she comes back. It's great.
So yeah, let's talk about that huge thing that they added to this first chapter of the story that was a huge addition, but we thought ended up working beautifully and elevated the entire story.
Yeah, in this case, I think it was a risk that worked. And we talked about this in the first episode, that there is this plot line in the book where Anne loses Marilla's brooch, or at least Marilla thinks she does. And Marilla is very angry at her and says she is to go to her room and not come out. And her punishment for losing Marilla's treasured amethyst brooch is that she can't go to the Sunday school picnic. And then it turns out that Anne was not lying. She's not a liar. She did play with the brooch but put it back, but then took Marilla's dictate literally that she can't come out until she confesses. So she makes up a confession thinking that that will get her to be able to go to the Sunday school picnic. And then they find the brooch afterwards.
And it's a great lesson in trust.
It's a great lesson in trust. It's a great lesson in character. We learn something about Anne, which is that she makes up things, but she doesn't lie. Like if she makes something up, she'll say, oh no, I imagined that thing. And the stakes in this situation are very high for Anne. She really wants to go to this picnic. She wants to taste ice cream for the first time. It's very important to her. The stakes in the sense of like the world are not enormous, right? We learn about what's important to Anne, but in the grand scheme of things, the stakes are not that high. They kind of, in making Anne with an E, took a little bit of a risk, I would say, that paid off in raising the stakes of this incident, which is that Marilla says to Anne, you can't stay at Green Gables. Like, you are a liar, and we can't have you here stealing our things. You have to go. And then after she's sent away, immediately they find the brooch, and Marilla feels horrible and sends Matthew after her to get her, and he basically like rides through the night frantically. She's already on the boat. He has to take the boat to catch her. He finds her in the train station like a busking for coins,
and he says something about Anne to another character
that breaks your heart every time.
I cried when we first watched it. It destroyed me this time.
Yeah.
Can you say the line? Because I can't.
She's my daughter.
It destroyed me.
Yes.
Destroyed me. Can I tell you, though, what didn't destroy me the first time and did destroy me the second time?
Sure.
When they get back to Green Gables.
Yeah.
And Geraldine James is a fucking treasure.
Yeah.
She's amazing. I've said this already. I'm saying it again. I'll probably say it again before the show is over. What she shows the audience that she's going through in the minute leading up to Anne walking up the path with Matthew, running out to see them, and then greeting Anne it's a masterclass.
Yeah.
It is a total masterclass because everything in her is so excited that Anne is back, but that's not who she is. She is not a person that shows emotion. And her reaction to Anne when she actually goes out to greet her is, well, go upstairs, get ready for supper. And that's who Marilla is.
Well, the first thing she does is scream at Matthew, it took you long enough.
Yeah. It was brilliant. And the reason it broke my heart is because I was watching it after watching... We went back and rewatched the first 2 episodes. It broke my heart because now we've lived with those characters for 3 years.
And she really goes on a journey. Like by season 3, she's getting Anne ready to go off to college and saying like, oh, my sweet girl, like I love you. I'll miss you so much. Like that would have been incomprehensible to the Marilla of episode 1, season 1.
Is incredible.
Yeah.
Just incredible. Like, I think really those first 2 episodes stand alone as just an amazing, the best singular hour and a half, 2 hours of the Anne of Green Gables adaptation that I've seen throughout all of these.
Yeah.
I think it's incredible. I'd love to spend just another second before we kind of get into what happens after the first season, just kind of dial in on the cast a little bit more, because you mentioned like how well cast these people are, but I was wondering if we could kind of go into each one of them and dig in a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's just start with Amy Beth McNulty.
Yeah.
What is it about her that, because I have kind of some things in my head that really make her such a perfect version of the character? What to you makes her strong as Anne?
She has this way of sort of like tumbling over her words in the way that Anne is written. I think it's a really good interpretation of the character. She just seems like an actual child.
Yeah.
In a really precocious way. In the same way that Anne is. And the nice thing about this being a TV series, of course, is that we're given the space to kind of grow up with her. Like this actually was filmed over the course of 3 years, presumably. And, watching the first episode and then watching the last episode, there's a perceivable difference in her, because she's older. Like she's 3 years older. Like she's believable as a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old, and she's believable as a 16-year-old because she grew up over the course of these 3 years, which is what we sort of have been complaining that we're not given in any other adaptation.
Yeah, one of the things I love about it, like you mentioned the way she deals with the language of it, it's a really strong choice, and I'm sure it came from a combination of her and the creators. She really has this beautiful way of always being one step behind her own thoughts, where she will say things constantly and then be surprised that she said that thing, which I think takes so much skill as an actor, especially someone who's not even 18 yet. I was so impressed by her throughout all of this.
Yeah.
And that's like her skill as an actor, but then there's also just the look of her.
Yeah.
We talked about it in the first episode. She's a very like beautiful young girl.
Yes.
She looks like Anne though.
Yeah.
She's not. She has a lot of character.
Yeah.
But she is everything that I read through the book about the way Rachel Lynn describes her. Actually, like applies to Amy Beth McNulty.
Yeah, she's really freckled.
Very freckled.
She's got a lot of teeth. She's got a lot of forehead. She is. I don't know if she naturally is redheaded or if that they dyed her hair. But they did a good job.
I think she is.
Yeah.
Like the interviews that I see, she looks.
I mean, she looks like a ginger, like her skin and complexion. Like
yeah.
I assume that she is.
She's scrawny, like little,
kind of
skinny.
scrawny.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she grows into I remember when we talked about her for the very first episode, saying like, oh, I feel bad like calling her like homely. I am sure she will grow into her looks like as she ages, and indeed she did. Like as we got to like the the third season. One thing that I liked is that she shows up at Green Gables. She's got her hair kind of braided into these like really tight pigtails. Just like Anne, like that's our conception of Anne, right? She's got her hair in 2 long braids. And by the time we get to season 3, she sometimes still wears her hair like that. And she sometimes wears her hair in different ways because she's a teenager and she's experimenting with a different look. And I remember at one point she says to another character who I'm not going to say who it is because we haven't talked about that character yet, but that character also wears her hair in long braids, and Anne has her hair down that day, but she says like, yeah, I like to wear my hair like that too sometimes. Like that's sort of her signature look, but she doesn't always wear her hair like that because she's a person and not a cartoon character. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
She's so good. She's my favorite Anne. Definitely my favorite Anne. We talked about Geraldine James a lot. She's a goddamn treasure.
You want to talk about Matthew?
Like, even better. He's even better than Marilla.
Yeah.
And she's a power. It's a powerhouse performance. This is R.H. Thompson as Matthew Cuthbert. It was so fun going back and like checking out old episodes of Road to Avonlea because he was in Road to Avonlea too as a different character. And once I saw him, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that guy, but it's obviously 30 years have passed. I feel like you can have, like, I'm imagining 3 points on a triangle, and you can have a Matthew at one corner who is very, very meek, but doesn't feel authentic. And then you can have at the other corner a Matthew who is not meek and inauthentic. And then at the top, you can have a Matthew who is both authentic and meek.
Yeah.
And I think Richard Farnsworth is meek but inauthentic. I think Martin Sheen is not meek and very inauthentic. Yeah. R.H. Thompson is perfect.
Yeah.
He's perfect.
It's the center of the Venn diagram.
I mean, one of the tricks of this is like, is there casting and is there writing and is their performance going to make me care about the character?
Yeah.
And my heart goes out to Matthew so often. He just delights us every single time he's on screen, whether he's happy, whether he's sad. What's the line from episode 2 when he it's after Anne yells at Rachel Lynn. It's in the first episode. What is he saying to Marilla that's like so beautifully delivered?
Oh, I can't possibly replicate it, but he's like, and this is from the book, that Marilla has this little flashback to a time when someone insulted her when she was a child, like thinking she didn't understand, and that it was something that had stuck with her and hurt her feelings, for the rest of her life, basically. And in this version, they make the choice to have Matthew like reminds Marilla of that. He's like, Marilla, remember when old lady Adams called you homely? Like that you suffered from that, as I recall. And Marilla's like, shut up. But just his delivery of that is so amazing. It's like my favorite line from the whole series.
And he's doing so many things in that moment too, because he's intimidated by Marilla. So he's not like super comfortable saying something like this, but he also cares about her. So he feels it's important to remind her of it. And he cares about Anne. So I think he thinks it's important in this moment, in Anne's presence, to bring that up as well.
Like in Anne's defense.
Like he's playing 4 different things at once, which is so different. Again, like I don't want to keep shitting on the president of the United States of America, but Martin Sheen he would only ever do one thing. He just did, I'm Jed Bartlett. I am confident, and that's the only thing he played. And R.H. Thompson plays so many different things. When he's proud of his 2 girls, when he's proud of Marilla and Anne throughout the 3 seasons, it's like the most delightful things I've ever seen.
Yeah, there's all these shots where it just kind of cuts over to him just being like, and it's just so cute and funny. It's impossible to convey in audio form, like what he's constantly doing in the background of any particular shot. There was this one episode from season 3 that we like sort of had this running joke that like he didn't understand what was going on, but he was just kind of proud of himself the whole time.
Like completely missing the point of the turmoil that everyone else was going through. But we can get to that too when we talk about seasons 2 and 3.
Yeah.
He is amazing. Do you have anything else to say about R.H. Thompson, the best Matthew Cuthbert?
No, I think everything that needs to be said has been said.
You mentioned Corinne Coslow's Rachel Lynde is your platonic ideal of Rachel Lynde.
She's so great. She's like one of the characters, like I think it's like her and Marilla that is, even like Anne, I think falters a few times, not her performance, but just like the way that the script treats her.
Yeah.
There are a few moments that within the course of the series that I was like, oh, Anne would never do that, but fine, I understand. Mrs. Lynde is perfect the entire time.
Yeah.
She is outspoken and loud and sometimes at odds with other characters, but always has a heart of gold. There's this one scene.
Are you talking about the one in season 3?
That she just breaks down because she's done something that she's not proud of, and she made a mistake, and she's upset, and Anne's upset, and Anne just like hugs her, and they're both crying.
Can I describe it for a second?
Go ahead.
So like Anne storms into Rachel's house and confronts her about this thing that Rachel has done that even Rachel knows is wrong.
Yeah.
And Anne is expecting a fight, and Rachel looks at her and just bursts into tears, and they immediately cut to the 2 of them holding each other's hands on a couch, and Rachel is just sobbing.
Yeah.
And like I remember something where, throughout the times that I was learning more about Anne of Green Gables, I'm meeting Rachel Lynde for the first time when Anne meets her for the first time, and I think she's terrible. And I remember you telling me when this whole kind of journey started, you said, oh no, they have a good relationship.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't really see how that can happen. This show does that relationship perfectly.
There's a moment in one of the books, I don't think we see it in this, because Anne's a little bit older. She's like, I think this is from Anne of Avonlea. But she says to Marilla, so in the books, after Matthew dies, there's this question of whether they're going to lose the farm, because the reason he died, as we know, is that the bank collapsed, and he had a heart attack when he heard this news. And Anne does end up getting enough money after a couple years of teaching in Avonlea to actually go to college, so she's away. And in the meantime, Rachel Lynde's husband, Thomas, has also died, which is very sad. So Rachel is left a widow. She's well off, but she is alone. And this, sort of, they're well-off people. And she's alone in her house. And she doesn't want to go live with any of her children because she doesn't like any of their husbands, which is understandable. And Marilla also knows that it would break her heart to leave Avonlea. So she invites Rachel to come live with her at Green Gables. So the 2 of them kind of set up housekeeping together. And help raise Davy and Dora, the twins that Marilla has also adopted, because she's now into the habit of adopting people. Anyway, this is a really long introduction to this tiny incident. But at one point, Anne says to Marilla, I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, I know this is just this wicked impulse, but anytime Mrs. Lind tells me to do something, I just have this urge to run out and do the opposite, whatever it is. And that's, I know that's wrong of me. And I need to like overcome this urge. And Marilla's like, I mean, Anne, I don't know what to tell you. Like, if it's wrong in you, it's wrong in me too, because I get the exact same thing. But just like, that's the kind of person she is. She's extremely well-meaning. She gives very good advice, but it's the kind of advice that makes you want to go out and do the opposite of whatever she's saying. And that's just like a perfect encapsulation of who Mrs. Lind is as a character.
Yeah. She's great.
Sorry, that was a long story.
No, it's fine. I mean, you mentioned Joanna Douglas as Miss Stacy. She is... I started crying when we met Miss Stacy for the first time because she is such a... We didn't even talk about... Well, what's her name? Marilyn Lightstone from 1985.
Oh, yeah, she's great.
She's really, really good. But Joanna Douglas is my favorite Miss Stacy.
Yeah.
And they really... They don't pull any punches with making her like someone that Anne would look up to.
Yeah.
She arrives on a motorbike in pants. And she is a spitfire.
Yeah.
She's just great.
Yeah, the Marilyn Lightstone from the 85 version is definitely a more book accurate Miss Stacy.
Yeah.
She's wonderful, but she is the Miss Stacy from the book. This is in Anne with an E, they sort of take the spirit of Miss Stacy and kind of dial it up to 11.
Yeah, as they do with a lot of things in season 2 and 3.
Yeah.
But I think she's really, really good.
Oh, she's great.
There's a couple other characters, but I think I'm going to wait to talk about them. Really, we got to talk about two last people. Lucas Jade Zuman as Gilbert Blythe.
Yes.
What'd you think about him?
He's not my fave. Like, he's kind of one of the best of a poor bunch. I mean, obviously Jonathan Crombie, R.I.P., but he's okay. Like, I think part of the problem with Gilbert in this is that they give him a storyline that I never really love. So there's not any good way to kind of separate him from the storyline that I'm not a huge fan of. So everything about his character kind of comes back to that, and it's hard to kind of separate his performance from the plot that he's given to perform.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd be interested to have seen him in a more classic adaptation. He's just not my favorite. Like, I mean, part of the problem is that one of the plot lines of Gilbert is like this sort of marriage plot that he's kind of debating whether or not to propose marriage to this other girl, and he's 16. Like, he still looks 16. I don't understand what's going on. Like, they needed someone who was kind of more of a man, I guess, and he can't quite pull it off.
I would say there was a quality to his acting that always popped up for me as something that made him feel kind of inauthentic.
Yeah.
I'm not saying his acting is bad, because I actually think he was really good, and in some moments he's great.
Yeah.
But he's not, I just don't think he's as strongly drawn as other characters.
He's very modern. Like, he reminds me of like a boyfriend character, but like from Degrassi. You know what I mean?
Well, okay. So I'm going to stop you right there because you have hit on our big transition.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about Jerry. Jerry's there.
Jerry gets very tall.
Jerry gets so tall. He goes through a huge transformation.
He hits puberty.
But we'll talk about Jerry. Jerry's one of my favorite characters in the show. I think he's very, very good. You know, we haven't talked about Diana. She's really good. The Barrys are really good. I really like everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I think the casting is great. But here is the big question. When does this show become Degrassi? Because it does.
End of season 2, beginning of season 3.
Disagree.
Okay.
I think it becomes Degrassi in season 1.
Oh, really?
Here's what I'd love to do right now. I'd love to do a rapid fire round with you. I'm going to talk through a selection of plot points that happen from episode 1 to the last episode.
Okay, that you've compiled.
That I've compiled. And I would love to know, just based on your immediate gut reaction, would you say this is Anne of Green Gables? Would you say it's Degrassi? Or would you say it's something else that's kind of weird?
Okay.
Anne arrives at Green Gables.
Anne.
They up the ante by having Marilla kick Anne out of Green Gables over the brooch.
Anne.
She's my daughter.
Anne.
Anne meets Diana and Anne meets Gilbert.
Anne.
Fire at the Gillis house. Anne saves the day and the town turns to her side.
Oh, right. So this is what she does instead of saving Minnie Mae's life?
Well, no, they do both.
They do both.
Yeah.
Yes, I actually did. It's teetering on the edge, but I still like it.
Anne gets her first period.
This is bridging the transition. This is becoming Degrassi.
That is Degrassi.
Yeah.
I think it's handled well.
It's handled well.
Marilla's reaction is amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, there we go. Anne saves Minnie Mae.
Anne.
Gilbert's dad dies. This is where the diverge happens.
This is where
right?
the diverge happens.
I feel like this is that third thing. It's not really Anne or Degrassi, but you didn't like it.
Yeah, I didn't like it because it's sort of like they end up having to have like a heavy-handed conversation about death.
In retrospect, I think the decision to do this was good. The execution I maybe didn't love.
Yeah.
Because Gilbert's boring. He's boring as a character.
Yeah.
And what they decided to do on this show is say, no, he's going to be an interesting character. He's going to go on an actual journey. He's going to have real experiences.
He's going to go to sea.
But he's going to do something.
Yeah.
I really respect their decision to do it. The way it shook out maybe wasn't our favorite.
Yeah, I think the third category is really going to end up as being like, it's not Anne, it's not Degrassi, it's this weird Gilbert storyline.
Yeah.
Because he meets a couple of characters that go into that storyline, which again is weird Gilbert storyline.
Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, back to the rapid
We'll
fire.
get back to it.
The Cuthberts do everything they can to save the farm and sell all their worldly possessions.
That's Anne, yeah.
Okay. There's gold in Avonlea.
Okay.
And there's two guys, so there's no gold in Avonlea, but there's two guys who are trying to pretend that there is, and they are staying with the Cuthberts.
Yeah, the conman with the golden Avonlea was like the first, I don't know, maybe 4 episodes of season 2. I did not care for this plot at all. This is not Anne. It's not Degrassi, but it's not Anne. And I really disliked it and was glad when the plot was over.
I don't think I disliked it as much as you did, but it was not my favorite.
Yeah.
Gilbert's on a steamer to Trinidad. Now, this is important.
Yes.
Obviously, this is not in the book, but one of the things that we talked about in episode 1 of this show is that there are no people of color
In season 1.
In season 1, and in any version of Anne that we watched. And we raised the point that, like, are there? Should there be? And we were told at the time, oh, wait, because you're going to enjoy season 2.
Mm-hmm.
Because starting in season 2, we actually get some characters of color.
Mm-hmm.
And not just, like, one. We get a bunch of characters of color. And this starts with Gilbert's trip to Trinidad. On the steamer, he meets a guy named Sebastian LaCroix, or Bash. Bash is a main character of this show starting in season 2.
Yes.
He is in almost every episode from then until the end. He is not from the books at all.
Mm-hmm.
He is entirely invented. I didn't find him entirely uncompelling.
That's fine.
But he's not. It's just super, super clear that the Bash storyline is not as strong as the core Anne, Marilla, Matthew, Gilbert storyline.
No, and I appreciate what they were trying to do.
Yes.
I do appreciate it. I really do. But he's just not a very strong character for me. I think I'll leave it at that for right now.
Yeah. They try to do a lot of different things, but some more stuff will come up.
Yeah.
Cole, the sweet little baby gay.
Degrassi.
I loved Cole.
Cole's amazing.
Like, just let's be clear.
And Cole shows up again in the last episode of the whole show, prancing around. He's amazing.
Just he's great. I have no problem with him. He's very Degrassi. The whole storyline is very Degrassi, but he's fun.
Cole is every 14-year-old girl's gay best friend. I had one. Everyone has one.
Mm-hmm. Anne dyes her hair and then has a pixie cut.
That's straight out of the book.
How cute is her pixie cut?
It's quite adorable. She only has it for like half an episode.
Real cute. All right. Billy Andrews is the literal worst to Cole.
I mean, this is Degrassi, but he is also pretty terrible in the books.
More terrible in the show,
More
though.
terrible in the show.
It's like more overt. The show is more willing to say that he's like just truly a terrible person.
Yeah, it's definitely Degrassi. He's like the bully of the school.
Yeah. Bash goes to the Bog and he meets Mary. And the Bog is a place in Charlottetown where all of the people of color live, where all the black people live.
Yes. That is the third category.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Prissy Andrews leaves Mr. Phillips at the altar.
Degrassi.
Right?
Yeah.
But, like, was it satisfying?
Yeah, of course it was. Because she became liberated and wanted to go to college. But it's very Degrassi in the way it was presented.
Exactly. Miss Stacy arrives in pants on a motorbike.
I'm going to say that's Anne.
It's taking liberties,
Yes.
but it is Anne.
Yes.
Cole goes to live with Aunt Josephine.
I mean, Cole himself as a human being is Degrassi, so we're going to have to go with that.
Okay, season 3.
Oh, boy.
Anne wants to know where she came from.
I mean, that's Anne. She does that in the books. She goes on a little quest to find out if she can gather any more information.
Mm-hmm. Bash and Mary have a baby.
That's third category.
Okay. Anne becomes friends with Coquette. Here's more people of color.
This is Degrassi.
It's weird. It's Degrassi and also the third thing.
Yeah.
It's very Degrassi.
Yeah.
So there is an entire subplot in season 2 where we actually get to meet some of the First Nations people who live on Prince Edward Island.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of aspects of this that I didn't appreciate, and there's some ones that I genuinely appreciated so much.
Mm-hmm.
It is very heavy-handed.
Mm-hmm.
This entire storyline is done with a very heavy hand. That's not necessarily like a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
But so many other things in the show are handled with subtlety, so to have something that isn't handled with subtlety really kind of sticks out. But there was one aspect of it that I really loved, and this goes along with the fact that Anne is super, super accepting of the First Nations people who live on Prince Edward Island. She makes a friend. She's great. She loves them because Anne is super accepting and is that type of person. Marilla, though, is like almost never accepting of them.
Yeah, she's like actively frightened.
Which felt honest, and it felt authentic.
Yes.
And it is supposed to be challenging. It's not the kind of thing, it would have felt worse if every character we liked was super cool with them and every character we didn't wasn't, because awful things happened to these people at this time.
Yeah.
Like people we would have liked at that time would still have been awful to these people.
Yeah.
So I appreciated that.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that is like they were able to handle the storyline of the Micmac people in this sort of interesting and challenging way. And I didn't quite understand why they couldn't do the same thing with the storyline of Black people in Avonlea, because it seemed like people in Avonlea were prejudiced against the Black people when it suited the plot, and they were super accepting of them when it suited the plot. That's what it came off like to me. So I found that did not ring super true.
Yeah. All right. Next,
but we'll get into that.
Next plot point. Mary dies of sepsis.
Oh my God. I hated this so much. Okay. So Bash goes to the bog to meet other people of color because he's the only one,
back
as far as he knows, on Prince Edward Island. And he's very happy because there's a big community there and whatever. And he meets this very beautiful young woman named Mary who's working in a laundry. Her big secret is that she presumably, I think, was raped like as a very young girl, like 14 or 15. She had a son.
Do we know that? Was that like in the show?
Yeah, I think so. I think that was in the show.
I don't remember.
I don't think he was the product of like a loving relationship.
Okay. Because she has another son.
So she has this son who is like essentially in the show he's supposed to be like 20. The actor who plays him is older than the actor who plays Bash.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit weird. So he's troubled, and he's kind of, hangs out with the wrong crowd and all this stuff. So anyway, Mary and Bash fall in love, and she's worried that he won't accept her because she has this son and there's a misunderstanding and he doesn't really mind. And then they have a very cute little baby named Delphine, and she's just adorable. And then when Delphine is very young, Mary
gets sepsis and dies.
And there's a whole episode where she's like, oh gosh, I'm just not feeling very well. Like I'm a little feverish, and I have this weird cut on my hand. I don't know. And there's this whole thing about like no doctor will treat her, so Gilbert has to go to Charlottetown to get like the one doctor he knows that will treat. So this is what I'm talking about, it being convenient. When it's convenient to the plot, everybody's really racist. But then everybody like accepts her and takes her to their bosoms when it turns out that she's dying. Okay, let me talk about Mary's death episode. Mary is exceptionally beautiful.
Yes.
Mary looks better dying than I look on my best day. She never looks sick. She never looks ill. She looks amazing the entire way through. And I actually took the trouble to consult with our medical consultant prior to recording the episode on this one, because I was so confused, and I questioned whether someone dying of sepsis, which is a systemic bacterial infection, I believe, would look just lovely and just quietly waste away. And the answer was no, sepsis is very gross and you're very, very sick. And the other thing was like the way it was diagnosed was the doctor was like, well, you have sepsis. I can't do anything for you, so I guess I'll see myself out.
Well,
And
it was a million years ago.
But it was like then for weeks she was fine, but she had this knowledge that she was dying, so she could kind of like say her last goodbyes and say, leave a legacy for her daughter. And they had this sort of lovely death party for her before she passed away, and she was just like a little bit weak.
The relationship she forms with Rachel is really, really nice.
I mean, it's nice, and it's nice that this character was like so beloved in the town, and it was all very sweet. Like the whole thing thing existed so that Anne could say, like, I didn't have anything from my mother. It's so nice that you have this chance to, like, pass something down to Delphine and write her a letter so she can read it when, you know, when she's older. All that was fine. I just took exception to how wonderful this woman looked the entire time she was dying.
That was like the thing that saved it for me was the letter, because that was when she was talking to Anne, and Anne was basically like, she's like, what should I do? And Anne says, okay, my parents died when I was a baby and I don't remember them. You need to write her a letter and tell her everything you feel. And that tied it to Anne's story.
Yes.
Because this is Anne with an E. This is Anne of Green Gables.
Yes.
It managed to tie it to Anne in a way that it really sold it for me. But most of it was just like a very sad thing about people I kind of cared about.
Yeah.
That was, it didn't hit for me.
Yeah.
Moving on. Diana gets a boyfriend.
I loved this. It's Degrassi, but I loved this for Diana.
Diana makes out with Jerry, the French-Canadian farm boy, a whole bunch.
Makes out is putting it pretty strongly. They like tenderly kiss like one time and like brush hands.
No, that's the thing that upsets him, is that he says she only likes him for the kissing part, not the talking part.
That's right. No, I love this for Diana. I thought they were a super cute couple. I really believed in them. Diana, I didn't love like in the first or even the second season. I just didn't love this actor as 13, 14-year-old, but once she's playing 16, 17, I feel like she really comes into her own. Like I found her story in season 3 very believable.
Yeah, I really liked this.
Yeah.
It was actually so it's funny. There's tons of stuff that are going back and forth that feel very, very Degrassi and very, very modern and unbelievable. But then it comes back to like genuine drama between Anne and Diana over Diana's treatment of Jerry.
Yeah.
And it felt believable because that stuff is kind of timeless.
Yeah, I said to you, I think at the time, like two best friends yelling at each other and giving their friendship necklaces back is such a mood that I think many of us can appreciate and remember from when we were in middle school.
Mm-hmm. Now, the flip side of all of this, there's a different thing that was happening through season 3. Billy Andrews is the literal worst to Josie Pye.
This is Degrassi.
I really don't want to spend a lot of time on this, not because it's not about an important subject, but because it is just the most heavy-handed thing that happens in this entire show.
Yeah.
And it is just, I don't think it's handled well, even though I really think their hearts were in the right place. What is like literally the 30-second summary of this? Billy
Andrews is supposedly about to become affianced to Josie Pye. He sexually harasses her at a party. Anne observes this. Anne is very outraged on behalf of the female gender, writes a newspaper article about it, and is shunned for doing so.
That was really good. I'm super proud of you.
Thank you.
But that was basically it. Degrassi, though.
Yes, very Degrassi.
Very much Degrassi.
So she wrote an article in the school newspaper about sexual harassment and bodily autonomy.
Yeah, it was like I was on board with all of it. I'm sitting there going like, I agree with everything that's happening right now, but it's very heavy-handed.
Yes.
Okay, Anne and Gilbert and Winnie.
This is Degrassi.
Mm-hmm.
This is Degrassi, unfortunately. So,
well, hang on. I have a question.
Okay.
What they were trying to do in a very short span of time was basically set up Anne and Gilbert to be very star-crossed and basically present to the audience that it's taking a long time for them to get their shit together.
Yeah.
And what they've done is similar to Anne getting kicked out of Green Gables in episode number 1. They've upped the ante for them not getting together.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you're going to go into it, and I want you to go into it, but I think it's like halfway between Anne and Degrassi.
You're right. And I believe they are paying tribute to an actual plot point in one of the Anne of Green Gables books in which Anne and Gilbert are at college together, and Anne is dating a boy named Roy Gardner who she thinks is going to propose to her, and she thinks Gilbert is dating this girl named Christine who is just very like socially acceptable and would be a very wonderful like doctor's wife. And it turns out that Gilbert's just seeing her around to parties. She's engaged to someone else, and Anne, though she has tried to convince herself she's in love with Roy, does not accept his proposal and ends up with Gilbert.
Mm-hmm.
That's in Anne of the Island.
So I think Anne of the Island is very Degrassi.
Yes.
I think that's what we found out at this point.
Yes.
Maybe Degrassi is very Ella Montgomery.
I mean, maybe.
All right, final one. Anne goes to Queen's College. She and Gilbert finally get their shit together.
That is Anne. That is from Anne.
I feel like they rushed it.
They did rush it.
I tried to find out. I like, for whatever reason, maybe I just didn't look in the right places. I couldn't find a definitive answer about whether they knew they were canceled before they finished the show. it feels like they knew they were canceled.
I mean, it definitely does. Like, basically, the show ends with Matthew and Marilla finally tracking down, like, this one piece of Anne's past, which is, like, a book that her father gave her mother with a beautiful inscription, and he drew a picture of her mother, so she now knows, like, her mother was a teacher, and she loved nature, and she had red hair.
Oh, my God. When Anne says, I look like my mother.
Oh, my God. I'm just crying, just, like, thinking about it.
I cried. So the show is so fucking good.
Yeah.
We're talking about all of these things that didn't work for us, but holy shit, all of it is packaged within a show that is so beautifully rendered and so beautifully produced. It's so good.
Yeah, I think it bears, like, just mentioning all of this stuff we're saying we didn't like. It does not matter. It does not matter that we didn't like it. We love the show. We love the characters. We would have been willing to follow them anywhere.
I wanted 5 more seasons of this show. 6 seasons in a movie.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted.
That's right.
And we're not going to get that. I like genuinely hope. I know that this isn't how things work, and that wishful thinking about canceled TV shows only works 1% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone looks at like Firefly and thinks, "Oh, it could happen for my show." I just hope that at some point in the next 5 to 10 years, there is a chance for them to revisit this world and these characters with these actors and these writers and give us just a little more of these people, because I want it. I want it. I want it.
I mean, I guess if living through a pandemic has taught us anything, it's that you can't have everything you want at every moment that you want it.
Ugh. And also, how fucked up, I'm going to say something right now, and I want you to tell me on a scale of 1 to very, how fucked up is this? I want to see R.H. Thompson die.
I mean, that was not what I thought you were going to say. That is fucked up. I'm very sorry to have to tell you.
So Matthew doesn't die in this show.
Yeah.
And the reason I think that's so fucked up is, I mean, obviously I'm wishing for like a character's death, but Matthew dies. Matthew dying is important. It's a real thing. Even the Anne we didn't like from 2016 handled it, you know? And this show never gets to it. It was so weird to watch the 3rd season of it going like, is he going to die? Is he going to die? Every time, like in the first episode, he has a moment where he like clutches his chest a little bit.
Yeah.
And it never comes up again.
Well, there were all these little Easter eggs in the very last episode for people that like know the book, because like he dies clutching a newspaper that has bad news in it, and like we kept seeing him with newspapers in his hand, and we went, oh no, but he was fine. He lives. He survives.
And the thing is, I know that these writers and these creators and these actors would be up to the task of portraying what their lives would be like after losing Matthew. And it is deeply upsetting to me that I'm not going to get to see them do that.
Yeah, I mean, the best scene, I would say, in the 1985 version is after Matthew dies and Anne just like sobs in Marilla's arms and they cry together. That scene is so emotional and so good, and just like shows the growth of those two characters like coming together in their grief. Because like the whole thing is like Anne, as she grows up, was never really especially close to Marilla. Like, she loved Marilla, but she was, you know, Matthew's kindred spirit. Mm-hmm. Like, Marilla is not a kindred spirit.
Yeah.
But the two of them definitely grow so much closer after Matthew's death. And I think the 1985 version did a great job of showing that. And as you say, I would have loved to see Anne with an E explore that as well.
It's just, it's a shame. It makes me sad. We're ending on such a sad note.
That is a sad note.
Well, I feel like this is really nice because we've had this really grand tradition on this show. When we go through like more than 3 or 4 versions of something across decades and decades, what always ends up happening is the last one we get to is the one that sucks the most. And it's the one we genuinely hate.
Yeah, we need to end on a bummer.
This one, it's so refreshing to be able to end on, for me, the best one.
Yeah.
Anne with an E, for me, someone who is newly introduced to Anne in my life, Anne with an E is the best version of Anne of Green Gables.
Yeah.
Even though there are things that are important to the story that we don't see, it's just so beautifully rendered.
Well, on that note, there was something that we did not do in episode 1 because we had not thought of it yet. Mm-hmm. And that was the thing we always end on, our quadrants.
Let's do some quadrants.
We're going to have a chance to put all of our Annes through the ringer, put them in those quadrants.
All right, let's talk about 1934. Do you think they cared about the source material, Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery?
No.
I don't think so either. Do you think they were successful?
I do. Yes. I'm gonna, this might be a hot take, but I'm gonna say yes.
Yeah, a soft success.
Yes.
All right. God, when do we have to skip? Oh, yeah, 1979. There's so many years without an Anne that we don't get to talk about. 1979, Akage no An. Do you feel that they cared about the source material?
Deeply.
Like, surprisingly deeply.
Deeply.
Like, I want to hear other people talk about it who know more about it than I do because it's so fascinating. Do you think it was successful?
Yes.
Yeah. Like, it's really good. Okay. 1985. Do you think they cared about the source material?
Yes.
Do you think it was successful?
Yes.
Yes.
Moving on.
Moving on. 2016. Do you think they cared about the source material?
Heck no.
Do you think it was successful?
Heck no.
And with an E, do you think they cared about the source material?
Maybe more deeply than anyone who has come before.
Was it successful?
Maybe more than anyone that has come before.
It's just a beautiful thing. I think anyone should watch it. And if you are one of the people that's listening to this, who listens to every episode of the show, whether you know the source material or not, first of all, let me tell you, we love you so much. But second of all, like, if you don't know Anne of Green Gables, I also didn't really know Anne of Green Gables. Give Anne with an E a try, because it's a beautiful, wonderful show, and it means a lot to me, and I love it so, so much.
The end.
Well, this has been Adapt or Perish. If you'd like to find us online, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at AdaptCast. And if you tweet about the show, don't forget to use the AdaptCast hashtag. You can join our groups on Facebook and Goodreads. You can also find and follow me on Letterboxd. If you have anything to say that's longer than a tweet, you can always send an email to adaptorperishcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, there are 2 great ways you can do it. First, tell a friend. Second, a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice would be greatly appreciated.
You're my kindred spirit.
I love you so much. I love you so much. I'm so glad you're more interesting than Gilbert. Wait, if you're Anne, am I Gilbert?
I mean...
Are we both Anne?
I think we're both Anne.
We feel feelings really hard.
Yeah, and also Gilbert is my grandfather's name. I don't know if I've ever mentioned that on the show before, so I cannot be in any romantic attraction.
We've got stuff to unpack. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye!